6:15, and we are opening up the public hearing on the Senate Education Committee. Will you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Victoria, will you do that?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first bill this morning is House Bill 10, and I invite the sponsor to present it. Representative Packard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I am Representative Sherman Packard, representing Rockingham 16. I put this bill in for one reason. And I truly believe this, and is that it is the right of the parents, not of the schools or the government or anybody else, to raise your children. Plain and simple. The schools are there to teach history, mathematics, English. That's what the schools are there for. They're not there to raise your children. The children are the responsibility of the parents. And that's why I put this bill in. And there is one small change in that we would recommend. It was a kind of a mistake made in legislative services. I did go down last night and have an amendment made up, and we can get into that afterwards. But with that, Madam Chairman, if I may, I would like to turn the presentation over to Representative DeSimone and Marco. They're the ones that crafted the amendment. Okay. You can take the original bill, put it aside. Just don't even worry about it. Look at the amended version that we passed in the House. That's the version of that, but it was, and there was a lot of changes. Representative DeSimone and Marco worked hours and hours and hours refining my original bill, which I agree with 100% to what it is right now. And if I may, Madam Chairman, be excused, I have to go upstairs for finance issues.
Okay. Fine. Welcome to your colleagues. They're here?
Okay. Yes, they are.
Yeah,
You're right.
okay. Please
Thank you.
take a seat. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and Honorable Committee. I come before you today in support of House Bill 10. The state of New Hampshire has been built on...
Would you start by stating your name, please?
I apologize. I am Deborah DeSimone. I represent Rockingham 18, Atkinson.
Okay, go
The
ahead.
state of New Hampshire has been built on a foundation of live free or die. That's part of a very strong foundation. In a family, the foundation of a family is built on good parenting. I believe that most of the parents in this state are good, honest, law-abiding parents. The unfortunate part is that through the years, parents have begun to lose their rights. I believe that it is essential for a child to be able to, and in most cases can, go to their parent when they are entering, especially their teenage years, when they're exploring new options for life, when they have more troubles than they ever had before, and things are very difficult for a teenager. It's been a couple years for me, but every one of us have endured those teenage years. I really have a hard time understanding why any legislator, particularly one who is a parent, would be against this legislation. Parents should be responsible for the upbringing of their own children. If parents do something wrong in that upbringing, there are laws that prevent that parent from continuing that type of behavior. But most parents never break the law. Most parents are in tune with the needs of their children, and they work to raise those children to be productive members of society. We came close to passing a similar bill last year, but it didn't make it over the finish line. So we went back to the drawing board. My colleague, Representative Markell, and Representative Packard and I worked countless hours with child psychologists, teachers, pediatricians, parents, and yes, children, to craft a bill that was safe for children, but gives the parents the opportunity to instill their values and morals into their children to become productive members of society. In a recent poll of more than 1,000 New Hampshire voters taken last month, respondents chose parents over state employees to have the final say over what happens with their children, who are taught nearly 2 to 1 in those margins. That included 83% of independents, 61% of Democrats, and the majority of Republicans. We support the parents' right to know what is happening to their child in school. We're not asking the school to call a parent when a child says or does anything. We're just asking in this law, in this Bill of Rights, that if a parent calls the school, they are told the truth. There are no secrets kept or lies being told, and that's what's been happening over many years. We support the parents who want to be involved in their children's life and take an active role in their education, which all parents should, and the majority of parents do. I think it's irresponsible rhetoric that perpetuates the lie that school personnel knows more than we do and what's best for our children. I think it's more that parents and educators should work together to create an entire upbringing of that child, but with the parents having the majority role. There was a time when parents were being labeled as terrorists, being attacked simply for wanting basic transparency. I think, honestly, in this room, there isn't a person who would disagree with transparency. Opponents of this bill will say the legislation is dangerous and harmful. I totally disagree. In the first line of this bill, it says the general court affirms it's a fundamental right of parents to direct the upbringing and education and care of their minor children. What's so dangerous about that? Again, I reiterate, if a parent is acting in a manner that is detrimental to the health and well-being of a child, the state steps in and the state can help the family become whole again. It's very important for us to understand that children thrive with both parents in their lives. The only thing that's dangerous and harmful is believing the parents, the majority of them, do not have the right to protect their own children. Parents deserve transparency. House Bill 10 provides that protection. I ask this committee to pass House Bill 10 and send it on to the governor for her signature.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee members? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for taking my question. So Speaker Packard said that there's an amendment coming forward that replaces the bill?
No, it does not replace the bill. The amendment that's coming is only a technical change in the RSA.
Coming later.
It is coming from, let's see,
It's being drafted right now.
it is. And it's only changing the particular RSA that there was a technical error in printing
Okay, thank you.
to correct that. Otherwise,
Senator Prentice.
Thank you very much, Representative. Thank you for taking my questions. And I believe I'm looking at to Senator Sullivan's question. So that, yeah, there's an amendment coming with a technical correction. I don't know to what RSA, but the version that we're looking at, as the speaker introduced it, is the as amended by the House, correct? This, I have the right bill.
you have the correct one that was amended, I believe.
Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure. Okay.
The amendment that was spoken about is that there was a technical error of RSA 186:11, Roman numeral 9, lowercase c, and it will be changed to 186, and it will be removing that RSA. This is the only change.
Yeah, we will get that.
You will get that
Yes.
correction. Yes, ma'am. Thank
Senator
you.
Prentice?
Thank you. And I have two areas of questioning. I might need follow-up, I might not, and I will yield to others who do. So Representative, on page 2, line 20, starting there, it talks about access and review of all medical records as the personal representatives of the children unless such representation is modified or terminated by the court, or the parent is subject to an investigation of a crime. Crime committed against the minor child, and law enforcement agency or other officials request the information be released, just so I can give the whole paragraph or section for folks that are listening. My question for you is, in the past, we've been able to provide protection for say a doctor or a healthcare provider's notes that are specific to mental health, to a relationship with a provider of behavioral health, a mental health provider. There was a lot of conversation, at least in my first 2 years in the Senate, on how deep do these records go? Because the first layer of records are very general, but when there are doctors' notes that may be specific to a difficulty in a relationship, something that could endanger the child, something there's a concern, or I have a concern, like how deep is the intent of this, and so I'll start there. Do you want all of the notes released?
Ma'am, this is only discussing medical records. It is not discussing psychiatry records.
Follow-up. So psychiatry records are a medical record. Respectfully,
I-
I have this habit of
I
pointing my
see.
fingers. Please don't take it any other
No,
way.
I get it.
I'm a hands person. So
And you should be.
So I want to point. So psychiatry records are they're medical records. So I just wanna, if maybe you could provide, and if you can't do it today, I'm happy to follow up with you, clarification on where we're going layer wise in this.
Where we're going later wise is for a parent to be able to parent a child without putting that child in danger. This particular section, as Representative Markell will discuss at length if you so need to, as the personal representative of their child is already in federal and state law. Parents can already exercise that personal representation right and access the medical records of a child. I really want to reiterate that, and I'll give you an example. At the age of 13, a child we used to say that a child could get married at age 13 in this state. We realized that that was ridiculous. It is also ridiculous on many accounts for a doctor to not work with a pediatric patient with the parents to help that child. So if a child goes and says, I don't know, I'll pull something out of the air. I want birth control. Well, there's a particular situation where a child did get a hold of birth control and became violently ill because the child didn't know, neither did the pediatrician, that there was a bloodline reaction to certain birth controls. So the child ended up in the hospital. Had the parent found a way to find out that information and help the child get that particular medication that was safer for them, it would have not put the child's life in danger. Children starting at about the age of 11 or 12, sometimes younger, but usually 11 or 12, start to experience things in those years that are very difficult for those children to navigate on their own. And I think it's best, in the best interest of those children, that the majority of good parents are able to assist those children in navigating those difficult years. And that's why this provision is in there. It's already in federal and state law, ma'am.
Any other questions by committee members? Senator Altshuler.
No, you can go ahead. I'll come back to it.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative DeSimone, for taking my question. So I've highlighted bits of the bill and I'm looking on page 3, the section that's about school board notifications on parental rights. And I've got a couple of questions around this. First, it's my observation from having participated in the public schools in my area that these provisions exist in policy and in law, and policy to support laws that we already have. So my question is, why do we need this? And secondly, if we're going to reroute all of this out of the spaces that they are into a space that satisfies the requirements of section 169I-5, are we going to, is the expectation that the property taxpayers for the public school are going to have to figure out how to hire somebody to coordinate all this? Because this doesn't happen magically. It takes administrative work to make this happen. And there's no FN on this that addresses that specific that specific need. In fact, the FN just says $0, but I'm looking at this section and it doesn't cost $0. This costs money.
And your question is?
My question is, how does this get implemented? Is the expectation when you wrote this legislation that school boards would have to pick up the slack, and thus the school would have to pick up the slack on creating this brand new set of policy, and at whose expense?
Thank you. Each year, every school district creates a student handbook. And this would just be included, the portions relative to the schools would just be included in that handbook, and that's why there isn't an FN. And quite frankly, to address one of your comments that said that most of what's in this bill is already in statute, you're correct. And the reason that we're bringing it all into a parental bill of rights is because I think, quite frankly, it can be difficult to us as legislators to navigate through the millions of laws that we navigate through to create legislation on a regular basis, to update it to meet the standards of today's society. So to have a situation where a parental bill of rights is scattered throughout millions of RSAs in this state, and that's an overstatement, I get it. But for them to navigate through is even more difficult. A bill of rights brings it all in one section without removing it from the other sections that it already exists in. It just puts it in one section to make it easier for parents, schools, and legal staff to go to one section to be able to avail themselves of what is and is not in the law.
May I follow up?
Follow up?
So, well, thank you for the explanation. And I agree with you that a lot of what is in here, you have coalesced into one place. And if the intent was to coalesce all of existing statute under one place, I would applaud that effort and support it. But that's not what this does. This adds a whole lot of other things onto that coalition of already existing law. And some of the things that are added in, I find very, very troubling. So, for instance, on page 2, when a parent is aware,
What line, ma'am?
page 2, we are talking about the immediate answers that have to be responded to. And I have that in my...
Would that be between lines 7 and 10, ma'am?
7 to 10. Immediate answer, yes. So immediate answer, thank you. When the initial request is made. So we know that teachers have an extraordinary amount of work to do before the kids get into the school during the day. And then they often stay much later than they are being paid for. And lots of them even take that work home with them because this job is so all consuming. And so what I'm wondering is when we create this process that rises to a response level of immediacy, is that to be at the expense of all other things? Or is it okay to set aside planning time? Like, we're going to respond to these parents' answers on Thursdays. We'll set aside the time, just like we set aside planning time after schools.
So, like parents, the majority of teachers are phenomenal, wonderful, dedicated people who educate our children. This particular section 7 through 10 talks about when a parent calls the school and has a question. The majority of the time, the teachers can and do answer those questions immediately. Some teachers, it has been reported in courts of law, have not and have chosen to refuse to answer those questions. So I definitely put in the or provided with no later than the 5 days, because you're absolutely right. Teachers may be entrenched in other work. It's not going to be detrimental to the health and well-being of the child if they take 5 days to answer, because they may not have the information that the parent is asking for, and it may take them up to 5 days to find that information. And that's why I put the 5 days in there. If they can answer it immediately, by all means they should. If they cannot, this gives them 5 days to do so.
May I follow up with that?
A quick follow-up.
Thank you. Okay, so so I'm hearing that your intention in here is to allow for a little bit of flexibility in that response.
Yes,
time?
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate hearing that immediate was has a different interpretation, and maybe we need to make accommodations for that.
If I may, Madam Chair, the majority of this bill, when it comes to the schools, is to continue the practice of parents being able to work in a partnership with the school, and this bill is trying to provide that in the cases where the schools and the teachers need more time. That's why provisions like this are being put in the bill.
Thank you. Did you have another question?
So,
Senator,
I think Sarah should.
yeah, I was just making a comment about thanking her about
okay.
outlining the immediacy. My question is about the nature of the information that that parents may be asking, and the information that teachers are expected to collect in terms of each of their students. So, is the expectation that now that teachers are going to be put on the spot to keep tabs socially on the students and answer these questions from parents as honestly as they can with immediacy, are educators supposed to report to parents everything they overhear, not just conversations that a parent that a teacher has with a student, but that a teacher overhears that student having with other students? Or are they supposed to also report to that parent things that they observe, who that student might be spending their social and extracurricular time with? Are they, if they're holding hands in the hallway with somebody, does that get reported out?
First, it is not an ask of this bill to report unless a parent calls the school and asks. The next is what you don't know, you don't know. We're not asking teachers to go and investigate. We're not asking them to become detectives. We're not asking them to do anything that they don't already do. And whatever they don't know, they don't know. If you don't know the answer to a parent's question, your simple answer is, I don't know. I don't have that information. It's simple. It's not asking a teacher to do anything that they don't already do.
Did you have a follow-up question?
I do. I have two. I want to go back to the mental health.
Oh, okay. Senator Prentice.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. I just want to circle back to the same section on page 2, and then if the chair allows, I want to talk about a section on page 5. So, again, access and review of all medical records. You gave an example of a prescription that had been given that this child, this minor, teenager, had a contraindication to, and that's like basic medical screening. So it's unfortunate that that was not picked up. But I'm talking about, there is an exception in HIPAA, and HIPAA only applies, it's a federal rule, when HIPAA doesn't globally apply, but it applies when there is the physicians, the care providers bill, Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare in particular. So there is a provision in here, and
Excuse me, Madam. I would like to defer that question to Representative Markell because he has a more in-depth knowledge in that area. And I get where you're going with this, and I believe that you should have a full and complete answer, and Representative Markell can provide you with that.
thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
One more. Okay. Totally different. Last page, 5, lines 13 through 27. There is a section in here on parental consent for healthcare services. So is this for healthcare services just in the school, or is this meant to be Yeah, and
Not only in the school, it's meant to be anywhere. Parental consent, except in the case of an emergency situation, parents should consent to all medical care for their children. Except, and I stress, except in the case of emergency.
well, thank you. And I won't disagree with that. I am a parent as well. My daughter is older now, and so, but just to follow up, so because this is an education bill, and then there's a very specific healthcare carve out. And I also serve on our Health and Human Services Committee, and I'm a healthcare provider. So, although I'm not a prescribing provider, I am a healthcare provider. But what concerns me is that this is tucked in here, and I'm not sure about its placement, but there are exceptions right now where, like a minor can. Now you gave that example of birth control where, there was a contraindication, and that should be the exception, not the rule. In basic screening 101, that you pick up these contraindications, but STD detection and treatment, access to birth control are not required by law to have parental consent. So is this going to make that so that we're going to have to see consent come into place here? That system has worked and worked well. So what I don't want to do is get into a situation where we have, we have say high school students, we have sexually active students who are afraid and are not accessing the healthcare that they need because they don't have that type of trusting relationship with their parent, and the law currently allows them to do that. So I don't know if this is an area that we can work on, but it just seems like there's this healthcare piece clunked in here that could conflict. I do believe does conflict with some current law. And so that's something I'm interested in further talking more about.
Well, again, I think it goes back to the point where most parents who are raising teenagers are navigating waters that they've already been through, but the child has not. And most good parents are going to be able to support those children. Children are afraid to talk about certain things with their parents. I raised 3 children and I'm helping raise 4 grandchildren. My grandchildren are from the ages of 19 down to 8. So I get the fact that kids are scared to talk to parents about certain issues. But when we're talking about medication being given or tests being given, if a parent is a good parent, the dialogue should be there. If a parent is not a good parent, then the law provides otherwise, and that's the reason for that statement. And again, Representative Markell can give you a more in-depth discussion concerning the laws and the parents who may not be good actors in the role of raising their children and how the law provides for that. My goal in this is sometimes misunderstood. This is bringing all parental rights together in one place. But my goal is to also protect the children. They are tomorrow. And we need to make sure that they are as healthy and prosperous and whole as they can possibly be, with the parents giving them a foundation that is strong. And that's the purpose. Because someday the parents aren't going to be parents, and I'm still a parent, but my children are now parents. So I'm not parenting necessarily anymore. And I believe that most people in this state are in the same boat I'm in. So I just want to set it straight so that the children can navigate through their most difficult years to become strong, independent, well-rounded, comfortable adults.
Thank you. I'll hold for, yeah, good, go.
Senator Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. I have a comment and a question. On page 5, number 14, it does state, except as otherwise provided by law or court order. So that would
Correct.
go back to your health question. I can't take credit. Senator Abbott sent that my way. But also, we keep having, when these bills come up, we keep having these conversations about implying, not even implying, stating that somehow we're asking teachers to document and journal what children are doing every day, which of course is not what we're asking for. Would you believe that when I was in high school, I know, a lifetime ago, but, and I grew up in a very small town, would you believe that my parents got calls from teachers without them even asking if I pushed the boundaries and broke some of the rules at school? Like, not that it actually happened, but hypothetically, if I got caught smoking in the girls' room or holding my boyfriend's hand in the hallway?
I thank you for that question. And I believe from what I heard, it was like a couple of weeks ago that you were still in high school.
Thank you for that.
I'll give you a little situation that I had with one of my children. We had a very difficult year. And in that year, in June, my son got hit by a car and was in the hospital for 2 weeks. My husband had a medical event that kept him in the hospital for 2 weeks. My oldest child's cat passed away. The day before, her sister went in the hospital for 3 weeks. And that was June, July, August. And then the school year started. And the week after the school year started, I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks. My oldest child, we said, jokingly, we're wrapping you in cotton and putting you in the closet so nothing happens to you, girl. Anyway, the school called me and said, your daughter seems sad. It's not like her to be sad. We are concerned. I, being what I believe is the average mother, was in my office at work. I told my boss, my daughter needs me, I have to go. Before I left my office, this was before cell phones, so I'm dating myself. I called the Center for Life Management and said, my child is in distress. I need you to see her today. And they said, has she ever been a patient here? I said, no. But the school just called me. I'm scared. They said, bring her here as soon as you can. We brought her there. It was the stress of what was going on in the family that was creating this situation. So do I expect all teachers to be investigating every aspect of every one of their students' lives while they're in the school? No. But teachers do see things, and they do want those children to be healthy. They do want to work with parents. And all this bill does, again, is bring it all in one place and say, let's work together. That's all it is. So thank you for bringing that up.
You still have another one?
I do. I just want to make it clear, if I may, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Sullivan, for raising the issue about except as otherwise provided by law or court order. But here's, and respectfully with that, here's my question. Section 1, or Roman numeral 1, is specific to the healthcare practitioner may not provide or solicit or arrange to provide healthcare services or prescribe medicinal drugs to a minor child without first obtaining written parental consent. 2 says, except as otherwise provided by law or court order, a healthcare provider shall not allow a medical procedure to be performed on a minor child in its facility without first obtaining written parental consent. So unless I appreciate you bringing that forward, but I'd like clarification, because prescribing services and procedures to me are different things. And they sit in 2 different sections, and I don't see the connection between the two. So this just might be technical that I've got to get some advice on, but I wanted to put that out there because as I see it, Section 1, if it's saying you can't prescribe drugs, and it's talking about services, which could be assessment, consultation, not necessarily, to me, section 2 talks about procedures. I think we have to be clear on what prescribing, is lawful in this age group and not, and it's very limited and for a reason.
Correct. And again, I will defer to Representative Markell, who has a legal expertise in that area.
Thank you so much. For
I thank you all for your questions. They've been fabulous questions. I appreciate the time you spent on this bill and hope that we can work together.
Senator Altshuler has one more question for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative DeSimone, for taking my question. This bill, on page 1, after the declaration of purpose, it says on line 6, new chapter, right? Parental Bill of Rights.
Yes.
And so everything here is a new chapter.
Yes.
I want to fast forward from there to page 4, lines 6 through 8. And while you are constructing a new chapter to provide this new coalition of rights, a lot of rights, not a little light on the responsibilities, but heavy on the rights. I'm curious about lines 6, 7, 8. The right to opt his or her minor child out of any portion of the school district's health education program that relates to sex education instruction in acquired immune deficiency syndrome education or any instruction regarding sexuality. So I'm curious as to a couple of things. Why acquired immune deficiency syndrome is only lumped into a sexuality section, a health, and then since you're making a brand new law, why do you want to take that vital piece of information out of health education for students when,
No, ma'am.
you and I grew up around the time when Ryan White, a 13-year-old, was one of the youngest people to get acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and his peers had no idea what it was. And it was a very steep learning curve for the whole nation at the time. So why take that out?
That statute's already in play. And I know that for a fact because when my youngest child entered the 6th grade, she brought home her sex education book and said, "Mommy, I don't understand this." And I looked at the book and said, "Yeah, you're not going to have to understand that. Mommy will teach you. You're going to be out of that class." I didn't like the verbiage in the book. It went against my beliefs and how I wanted my child to be raised. And I chose to teach her sex education at home with our values, not with what was in that book. So, and she is now 40 something higher numbers. But so that's already been in statute. And again, these statutes are already in play. It is the right of a parent to opt out already. This is not new.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Okay, so I just want to dial back to and clarify my actual question. This is a new group of statutes, right? It is not only that which exists in law. You have added things to this
I
that
have.
don't exist. Right. So in constructing this, you took liberties to add some new things in, and you also could take some old things out. And if we know that acquired immune deficiency syndrome education is independent of sex education, because that is only one way to contract that disease, and to know that that is a very serious disease, and we have the youngest person, who ever contracted and then subsequently passed, who never engaged in sexual activity. as a person who had this disease, I think that was our learning moment as a nation to understand that acquired immune deficiency syndrome transcends. It's one of its methods of contraction. And so my ask is, why continue to conflate that?
This bill is only saying that for those parents, and albeit few, who choose to teach their child their way instead of their child being in a classroom and being taught that acquired immune deficiency aspect of education is extremely important. You're not going to hear me disagree with you at all. Children should be taught that, but there are parents who choose to teach their children at home, not in a school environment. Most parents don't have a problem with their children being taught in a school environment. End of story. It's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's a partnership with the school, that the school would teach their child a very important information consistent with their growth to become an adult. There's nothing in this that says that it should not be taught in a school environment. It just simply says that if you are a parent who chooses to teach your child at home, you have the right to do that. That's all it says.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll make it really quick, I promise.
Okay, quick.
Thank you. Isn't it true that in statute, it says that if the parent chooses to pull their child out of that class or that lesson, that they have responsibility to teach that lesson?
It absolutely is.
Thank you.
Already in statute, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. And I do appreciate all your questions.
So we have quite a few people who would like to speak on this bill. So I'm going to have to say 3 minutes. If you have testimony written down, please provide us with that. If it is not written down, summarize your notes so that we can have a good summary of what you wanted to say. Is Oliver still here? Yeah, I know, but I'm looking for Oliver because he had a
Yeah,
time
time
limit.
limitation.
He had to leave.
The hall, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because he had to leave, had a very, if he's here, I'd just like to hear him.
Thank you.
He may have left already. Okay. You didn't hear, you're now limited to 3 minutes. So if you have your things written down, let us have it, or summarize.
Because last night, the digital submission wasn't working for me.
Okay.
I will do my best to get this done in 3 minutes. It took me 6 last night, so we'll see. All right. Hello, my name is Oliver Bonema. I'm currently a student enrolled in a private institution and a resident of New Hampshire. I'd like to note I'm only enrolled in a private institution because I was bullied so severely that I was forced to.
No, it's not. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just gonna start over because of that. Okay, hello, my name's Oliver Bonema. I'm currently a student enrolled in a private institution and a resident of New Hampshire. I'd like to note that I'm only enrolled in a private institution because I was bullied so severely in public schools to which nobody did anything, including teachers, faculty, guidance counselors, and the superintendent of the Kearsarge district did not do anything. And I am here in opposition of this bill. Firstly, I would like to mention that much of this bill is redundant. For example, under page 2, section 1, subsections B through L, these are already covered in the New Hampshire education laws, as are the exceptions to this bill, for example, situations of abuse or termination of parental rights. As is page 3, section I, subsection A through E, page 4, section 2, and page 5, sections 3 and 1 through 5. The main portions of this bill that I take issue with are page 2, section 1, subsection A, and page 4, section 1, subsection C, D, and F1 and 2. My concern with the former of those is that it could lead to the non-consensual outing of LGBTQ+ students that is revealing their identity to their parents without their consent. Already in schools, 60% of LGBTQ plus students report hearing homophobic remarks from staff, and 70% hear negative remarks about gender expression. Students also report physical harassment at a rate of 7 to 10%, physical harassment at 14 to 16%, and verbal harassment at 41 to 56% due to their sexuality, gender expression, and/or gender identity. These students, these children that you are targeting with this section, are already experiencing emotional and physical abuse from their peers. If a child has not told their parents about their identity, it is likely because they do not feel safe doing so. According to the NIH, 1/3 of youth experience parental rejection, and 1/3 do not come out into adulthood. This number is likely even greater when one considers the high suicide rate of children without supportive parents. They are 12 times as likely to attempt suicide. And to those of you who say suicide rates are a threat, I know nearly a dozen friends who have attempted suicide. A significant majority of my friends have struggled or currently struggle with self-harm. Do not call these suicide rates a threat. I've had to talk people off of metaphorical and literal ledges. I have had to plead with people to stay alive, to not cut, burn, hit, or starve themselves. So please do not even suggest that. Okay, now on to the further legislation. Subsection C of page 3 allows for a parent to object to instructional materials based on morality, sex, religion, and the belief that such materials are harmful. This is incredibly broad and allows a parent to object to any materials that does not fit their worldview. White parents can object to the teaching of any history of racism because of the supposed guilt it inflicts on their child. Yep. Parents who are sexist against the liberation and equality of women can object to those materials on the basis of it being against their religion or harming their male children. Parents can object to the teaching of religions other than their own due to their religious beliefs. Further, I would like to speak in opposition to the option for parents to withdraw their children from health classes, especially related to sexual health, quote, sex education, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and sexuality. Sex education can help prevent the risk of unplanned pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases by providing information for young people about reproductive issues and encouraging consistent use of contraception or STD protection.
Yeah, your time is up.
All right, thank you.
Was this what you provided us? Was that what you're reading now?
That is, yes, I'm reading from that.
Okay, you don't need to read it. If we have it here that you gave us, right?
Yes,
So we can read it on our own, whatever you didn't manage to read to us.
okay.
So we appreciate it. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Oliver, for providing. And I would just like to commend you on your notes.
Oh yeah, I have a
Any-
summary of the bill too
Yeah,
on my copy.
any testimony that actually is footnoted, chef's kiss. I appreciate that.
My apologies for my lack of in-text citations. I wrote this
Nah.
at 2 a.m.
Your girl's going to be cutting copy on that, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
thank you.
Hope you don't miss your class. The other person from the representative, you want to continue the introduction?
Yes, thank you for, yes, thank you for allowing me to speak. I do have a brief handout.
Now, if you can, I know that you have a lot of stuff. If you can summarize it, make it easy for us, because we
Well,
really
this
do.
is just a copy of the
Okay.
parenting plan.
Great.
Which is in white, which has been in use in the state of New Hampshire since
Okay,
2005.
could you use the microphone? Because
Sure, okay, just a sec. And,
we have a lot of people who want to speak on this bill, so
okay.
if you can sort of make it short and sweet, that will be much
Okay.
appreciated.
Okay, well, I was asked to address certain questions, and so I'm happy to address them.
Yep.
Okay. First of all, as far as being a personal representative goes, that's basic. Parents are, as a matter of statute and law, basically are the guardians of their children from the time of birth. HIPAA concerns, I understand, and personal representation in the HIPAA context means that you're entitled to access records. Now, the question earlier was notes. The reason why I distributed the parenting plan is because the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and in fact 461A, and that's why I marked at the top, see page 7, basically provides as a matter of law within reasonable restrictions. And I think you might want to see page 7 in terms of paragraph E, in terms of information sharing, access to telephone, electronic access. And then if you want to look at Okay. And then if you want to look before that, I'm sorry, here, they have the right to access their children's records. And just looking for where it is. Okay, yeah, paragraph E on page 7 of 9. Basically, parents have the rights to do it. And basically, these things are basically rules of reason, okay? When you look at them. And so, for example, if I hear things that are more adversarial in nature, that may be something which is different than what goes on in law. For example, when you want to look at restrictions in terms of access of information, one of the lead cases on that is going to be In re Berg from 2005. So, for example, when we talk about unless there's either a court order or a statute doing it, it recognizes that the state has a competing interest in the well-being of children. And so things can be limited. So I hope that answers your question. If not, okay, what else do you think you would need to know?
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Ward, and it's representative?
Yes,
Okay. So so thank you for taking my question.
sure.
I'm looking at the exception in HIPAA for the notes,
Right.
not the general, like, here's the, I call them the layers of medical records. There's what I
Right.
can see when I look at my own record, but I can't always see the physician's notes. And there's an exception when it has to do with, like psychotherapy notes as having a higher level of protection. I get, and maybe if I had more time to look at this, I'm trying to understand how E of the parenting plan you shared with us would say that this, say, supersedes HIPAA if it's an agency that has to be HIPAA compliant by federal rule.
Well, no, what I'm saying here is that, but that is still subject to a court order, mindful of the fact that these are minors. So, for example, and so what I'm saying here is that if for some reason they become necessary, there's always going to be an opportunity to go to the court. And so that's the point. Okay, so in other words, that's why it says unless modified by court order. So for example, and so one of the things that I think is important is that we must not ignore the fact that there are a lot of parents who are either separated or divorced today. And I think we have to acknowledge the fact that basically under RSA 461A, which plays a vital role that this government, that this legislature body passed, and it's an effective statute. And what it does is it puts into statute parental rights and responsibilities. So, for example, why would a parent that's either initiated a parenting plan in the case of an unmarried set of parents, or for example, in the case of a divorce, they're basically going to be able to get those rights because they're going to be able to have a judge decide a court order. Now, because you're asking very good questions that just simply aren't answered in literally 10 seconds. And so that's really it here. So for example, and I think Berg is instructive on the case because it's on point here because it's a lead case. And in that particular situation, there was a custody battle going on, and one parent asserted that they wanted the records of the child, including whatever. Okay, the court held, for example, that in that instance, okay, because this was a nasty custody battle, that the child's records were not available, okay, and they weren't going to use them for the purpose of basically either exacerbating a custody battle or alienating one parent from another or alienating a child from another parent. That's why Berg is an important case. And what it does is it represents the competing state interest that the state has in parenting. The other things that from what I was listening to before here, and I respectfully point out, is that these things are basically permissive. They're not binding on parents. There is no real, there's nothing that says a parent shall withdraw a child from a particular class. They simply may. Okay, these should be interpreted, I think, and I understand that there are going to always be competing concerns. And the thing is that why would a parent, for example, who may be subject to a parenting plan, and every parenting petition and every divorce with minor children has them, and they're a part and parcel of the proceeding. Why would they be able to obtain more rights than the average person, or be more aware of their rights than the average person would be? And the reason why the statute has certain limiting factors in there, modification, court orders, is because we're going to need those kinds of escape valves. And like most things in law, they're subject to legitimate debate and reasonable discourse and argument. Okay, so for example, we can do this, or I'd like to be able to do this because, or we shouldn't do this because. So this tries to strike a balance between that. It's not binding. And one of the other things that I think is important to note is that children, okay, have certain rights, and this is not an anti-kid speech, okay, but they don't have a full panoply of rights, and this is important to note. For example, children, as a matter of law, are not allowed to intervene in their parents' divorces, okay? They're not allowed to do it. Children are allowed to consent to certain things, but certain things society deems them incapable of consenting to because of their age and lack of maturity. For example, when I was a youngster, 18 was the drinking age. Now it's 21 for a variety of reasons. There may be some 18-year-olds who can drink responsibly and some 50-year-olds who should never touch the stuff, okay? But we don't regulate that way, okay? 16-year-olds can consent to sex, okay, in this state. Prisoners, however, can't, and that's to protect prisoners, okay? So this is why. So the question is, where are we drawing the lines? And I didn't want to go on too far. So if there's any other questions I can answer, I'm happy to do it.
Okay. No, you clarified that for me, and I dug a little bit deeper on the court order language, so we're good.
Oh,
On
okay.
the medical record. So it's normally protected by HIPAA with the exception of law enforcement
Yeah.
or a court order.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So in other words, and that's why it is.
This has been respectfully, it has been a discussion here before.
Okay.
In my first 2 years in the Senate, so I wanted to revisit this.
Okay.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
David Trumbull. Remember the 3-minute rule?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee members. My name is David Trumbull. I'm from the town of Ware, and I oppose this bill for two essential reasons. First, it goes against the New Hampshire Constitution. The New Hampshire Supreme Court recently ruled on this issue and held that the standard in law should be the rational basis test, not the strict scrutiny test. This law uses the strict scrutiny test. In the New Hampshire Supreme Court, a case of Doe versus Manchester School District decided last year, involving whether a school should be forced to reveal a student's LGBTQ status to the parents. That is the holding of the court, and it was based solely upon the state constitution. The court ruled this way for three important reasons. First, that parents' rights are not an unqualified right in school settings. It's not an absolute right. Second is that school policies do not place any limits on a parent's ability to parent their children as they see fit. And that's the exact language from the Supreme Court decision. In fact, they go further to say that any interference in parental rights would not rise to the level of being a constitutional dimension. And third, the court said that parents have numerous self-help remedies, listing 8 ways that parents could assert their parental rights and learn information about their children completely independent of the schools. The Supreme Court has answered the question, should schools have to, in every single situation, answer completely accurately and truthfully to parents? And the answer is most of the time, yes, but not all of the time. The essential feature of this bill is that it makes it the rule all of the time. The second reason I oppose this bill is that it infringes on children's rights and would cause harm to our children. Children should have a say in decisions about their own life. That includes having the right to talk openly with adults who they wish to speak with. This bill creates a legal paradigm that gives parents 100% of the rights in this scenario, and children get 0% of the rights in this scenario. This is not a bill that is balanced. There's no room for discourse. Children have absolutely no rights under this bill. Look in the bill. Find a prescription in there that says the child can say, I don't want you to talk to my parent. It's not there. Third, the bill will increase teenage homelessness. This bill forces school employees to out LGBTQ children to their parents if asked. This bill says that even if a school has a reason to believe that doing so would threaten the well-being of the child, home is not a safe place for many children. The presenters say most parents are good parents, and I agree with that, but we know that 14% of LGBT youth were removed from their homes by their parents, largely because of their LGBTQ status.
30 seconds left.
As for the sections that deal with child abuse, and therefore it would solve this problem, look at Roman numeral 2, sections A, pages 3, lines 3 through 8. Those don't take place until after a child has been outed by the school, and then they have been removed from their home or kicked out onto the street. It does not solve the problem. There are a couple other reasons which I can't get to, as you'll see in my notes. I also give you a copy of the Supreme Court decision. I'd be happy to answer any
Your
questions.
time is up.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Trumbull, for taking my question. We've had a lot of discussion here this morning about the relationship between parents and faculty and parents and healthcare providers within the school. And I'm interested about your take on the relationship between students and their coach, their librarian, their theater director, their, chess club organizer, these kids who have extracurricular activities that they spend a great deal of time in with the same group of kids and develop these relationships with their teammates. This is outside the realm of sports, but, we're talk about that kind of relationship and how this bill might threaten that.
Thank you for the question, Senator Altshuler. I agree with your comment completely. I've been a coach myself for over 40 years. I've coached youth activities and sports for 15 or 20 years. And you do develop relationships with the people that you're working with, as do teachers and paras and counselors. Every child needs a trusted adult in their life. If their parent is their best friend, they have that. Right? But even if there is, sometimes they need somebody else that they can bounce an idea off of. Or maybe their parent is somebody who, if they found out that they were gay, would toss them out onto the street and say, I don't love you anymore. I don't want you in the house. You're out of here. A child needs somebody that they can turn to. And on my testimony, I think it's page 3 or 4, I gave you some statistics that children who have a trusted adult in their life are 40% less likely to report having attempted suicide. And suicide is the number 2 leading cause of death for teenagers in the United States. So it's a huge issue. This bill creates a scenario where a child will be afraid to talk to that trusted adult because if the parent approaches the school and says, tell me about my child. Are they gay? Are they dating somebody of the same sex? That coach will have to answer completely, honestly, and, well, exact the wordings, but it's accurately, truthfully, and completely. So even if the coach isn't investigating every child on the team, as the speakers before me have said, they don't have to investigate. You hear things if you're in a school, if you're working with children. It's not investigating, it's just things you hear. But you know that that child is talking to you because they trust you, and they need a trusted adult.
What was that? Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good to see you, and thank you for taking my question. You just, in your testimony, you had expressed concerns about a parent may kick a child out of the house. Now, it can be for whatever the reason is. I guess if it's a minor, my thought is, wouldn't that already be illegal, at least amount to abuse and neglect, if the parents were to just basically kick a 13 or 14-year-old child out of the house without anywhere to go?
Thank you, Senator Abbas, for your question. I think it would be illegal. It would probably fall under neglect. It's more likely to happen to somebody who's 16 or 17 than somebody who's 13 or 14. But the the sponsors of the bill say, don't worry, we have this provision in here that says that child welfare agencies can still act in their regular capacity. That's too late. See, right now, somebody who just testified said, Oliver, that a third of children who are LGBTQ don't come out to their parents. School might be a safe place for them to be LGBTQ, but they don't tell their parent. Now, this bill says that if the parent asks the school has to tell them. They're mandatory forced outing. So now the child is outed to their parents. The parent then tells the child, I don't want you living here anymore. And I gave you statistics on how often that is. It's too late to say, well, it's illegal. The child is already out of the house. That relationship between the child and the parent has been damaged. Saying it's illegal doesn't solve the problem. And just further, the child solves that problem for themselves now by not outing themselves. They wait until they grow up to talk to their parents. They wait to grow up. They wait until they're over 18 or 21 to talk to their parents. And I'll say one other thing. This bill has been through, as you know, numerous repetitions in the House and the Senate. The most moving testimony that I heard was from a dad who came in and said, I was that parent who was homophobic when my daughter was LGBTQ as a youth. It took me a long time to get around to realizing that I shouldn't have been that person. But that's what happens. There's a lot of kids, their parents aren't able to hear that at a certain moment in time. They react passionately, I would say perhaps unsafely for their child. So having a law saying it's illegal doesn't do any good. It's too late.
And I can appreciate the concern that you're expressing. I guess, what do we say to the parents who aren't like that, who aren't homophobic, who are just inquiring and trying to be more involved in their kids' life, and they inquire with the school about this sincerely, yet perhaps in that situation, I would think that disclosure or withholding the information may be more damaging than helpful. So what do we say to the parents that aren't in that category that you just referenced?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. The bill does not preclude schools from talking to parents. In fact, that was one of the key holdings of the Doe case, was that the Supreme Court said the Manchester policy doesn't prohibit schools from talking to parents. It just gives them the ability to not do it if they are fearful for the safety of the child. So in those cases, they probably would talk to the parent because they say, Senator, you're safe, you're trustworthy, we're happy to talk to you. It's the parent who that child has made it pretty clear. If my dad finds out, I'm going to be out of the house. That's the parent that they're concerned about. But for the good, call him a good parent, but the parent who's going to be supportive, it's not a problem. They're going to talk to them. And as the sponsor said, most of the time, schools work with parents and do talk to parents.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Trumbull, for taking my question. I'd like to ask you a question about your personal experiences as a coach, since you spent 4 decades working with young people. And so 4 decades, you've seen 2 generations of kids come through your programs. And has it ever been your experience that a student who needs a trusted adult outside the confines of their own home is looking for that person because they don't feel comfortable and, in some tragic situations, safe having this conversation at home? And on the flip side, when a family does create an open and affirming family unit, those kids aren't seeking trusted adults outside of that open and affirming and supportive family unit. So are there not 2 avenues that we're trying to make sure kids have to be able to find trusted adults?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Altshuler. I think a lot of times there's not a limit on how much care a child can get. Parents can't provide 100% of it. And sometimes even the best parents, that child, to continue growing as a person, other adults give them something that the parent can't give them. And so those relationships are really important. But a bill like this that puts a disciplinary policy on people who work in schools, those people are going to be afraid to have conversations with a child because they may not know where that conversation's going. They may not know that the parent at home is a safe, good parent. As soon as that conversation starts, they're going to say, shut it down. Don't talk to me because I don't want to have to tell your parent if this conversation goes in a certain direction. And so what's going to happen is schools will go from being a safe place where you have that partnership that was described by the sponsor of the bill right now. This is the way New Hampshire schools are. It's a safe place between parents and children and teachers that work together. That wonderful fabric environment is going to be removed because this puts the chilling effect of disciplinary action over the situation. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Evan. Remember, 3 minutes.
Oh, don't worry.
Okay.
I got a short one. Unfortunately, I do not have a paper copy to give you guys. I tried to submit a digital one and it was not functioning this morning, but I can try to get a digital copy to you guys as soon as possible.
Just send it
Yes.
to a legislative aid.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for hearing my testimony. Good morning. My name is Evan Weaker. I am a transgender resident of Durham, New Hampshire. While studying at UNH, I have worked for 3 years as a counselor for Campus Rec's youth programs. Through this job, I've had the honor and privilege to be a role model for several queer youth. I have been the first trans adult a trans child has met. I have been the first adult a queer child has trusted their identity with. This role is the most important I've ever taken on and the most fulfilling. I will never forget how one child looked up at me and said, "You're just like me." He gave me a bracelet that I wear every day. Another saw my pronouns on my counselor poster and excitedly told me, "I can tell you anything." Yes, schools are a place to learn, but they are also the places where these moments occur. Yes, parents should have rights, but children should have the right to be in control of how their identity is shared. The consequence of HB 10 is stripping kids from community and the ability to freely express themselves without looking over their shoulder. It will not make these children untrans or unqueer. No legislation ever will. All it will do is prevent educators from supporting queer and trans kids. HB 10 is simply terrible policy. It does nothing but further isolate queer children during a time when they most need the support from safe adults in their lives. The presenters think this bill will protect children. Please, please listen to everyone here today. HB 10 will save no child. Live queer or die. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Cassandra Sanchez. Welcome.
Good morning. For the record, Cassandra Sanchez, child advocate for the state of New Hampshire, and I have with me.
Attorney Lissa Massey, I'm the Associate Child Advocate.
Thank you for taking the time to hear from us today. We are here as we have some concerns for the language within this bill, particularly where it reflects on the work of child welfare and ensuring the safety of New Hampshire's children. In our work in oversight of the child welfare system, it is very critical that the important information that children are disclosing, whether it be at a school setting or with other trusted adults, be shared in a timely fashion, and that there not be any interruptions to that or any mitigation of that information getting to the appropriate authorities. There is no reference in this bill, as it is currently amended, that relates directly back to 169C, which is our Child Protection Act. There is a reference on page 2, oh, sorry, not wrong page. Page 3, line 8 to RSA 186. And in the lines prior to that, it does note that the section does not prohibit, and it says employee of the government agency that's responsible for child welfare. But again, there is no reference to the particular statute, which is 169C, that is our Child Protection Act. And without those references, I do worry that some teachers may feel that they have that responsibility to report to the parent or share some information that is actually more relevant to be shared with child welfare before bringing it directly to that agency. In this as well, I hold concerns for this interrupting the integrity of criminal investigations. On page 2, it speaks to the immediate answer being provided, but if it cannot, allowing the 5-day response. Teachers may not know immediately or even within 5 days that there's a criminal investigation ongoing. A lot of information in criminal investigations, particularly those in regards to the welfare of children, are confidential until they are at a point in their investigation that they have enough evidence to go ahead with an arrest or, filing in the court of some sorts. But there is a lot going on behind the scenes with law enforcement, with child welfare, that includes keeping certain information from a parent as they investigate, including law enforcement having to ask child welfare agency to keep information from parents until they're at a point in the investigation that it will not interfere with the work that law enforcement is doing. So again, without any direct carve-outs in here, I do worry that this is going to impede investigations, which then would result in unsafe situations for children.
1 minute left.
The last section I wanted to point to, which was discussed here a bit earlier, is that the last section, and I want to thank Senator Prentice for bringing that up, the parental consent for healthcare services. I do have quite a bit of concern with that final line 25, where a healthcare practitioner could be held with disciplinary action for violating it, and it could lead up to a Class A misdemeanor. Again, putting our medical professionals in a position where they are not the experts with this kind of information. And so if they are withholding certain information, and again, it's coming back to child safety purposes, holding that where there would be that level of disciplinary action, it puts our medical providers in a really difficult situation. And we do not want to be losing providers that are caring for children because they fear somebody coming after them criminally or civilly. With that, I am open to any questions.
Okay, thank you. Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Sanchez, for coming here from the Office of the Child Advocate. And it looks like there might have been something you weren't able to get to, a topic that you briefly introduced. Could you just expound upon that?
The only other topic that I did want to ensure that I spoke on as a child advocate for the state of New Hampshire is the point that we have heard here already, that there are many, particularly our more vulnerable youth and those in the LGBTQ plus community, that are at risk with bills like this and the trusted relationships that they have with adults at schools. And that is really critical to their overall health. So that is a topic that the Office of the Child Advocate consistently supports, because we want to ensure that we are providing children with the support necessary for them to have positive outcomes in the future.
May I follow up?
Follow up.
So when a child when your office gets involved, children are already, for the most part, been removed from their homes and have other placement or sometimes out of state. And we appreciate the work you've done to bring our students back. Thank you very much. When you're working with those students who have been removed from their homes for abuse and neglect, what is your experience with tracking how many of those students had struggles within their home with their LGBTQ status being a factor in the home relationships?
Unfortunately, this is a national trend that we're seeing where now that states are collecting data about child identity, they're finding that there's a high prevalence of children in care across the country, particularly who identify as LGBTQ plus because of the lack of acceptance in their home environments. So that is something that we as an office see often. We meet with these children and work to provide them support. And oftentimes what we do hear from these children is that the trusted adults at school are the ones that they felt they could go to for support. So again, that's where it brings it back to the importance of those trusted relationships and allowing a child to come forward to their parent when they're ready. Not saying that they should be intentionally secretive, but the appropriate trusted adults should be and typically are the ones that are encouraging the child to, when they are ready, share this with their parent or help them develop a way to share it that also protects their own self and their own mental health and needs.
And if I could just add to that, Senator Altschiller, an issue that has not been raised yet is there are concerns too about additional carve-outs around 169C in this bill. When children are removed, their parents' parental rights are not immediately terminated. While they're in that system, they still have fully intact parental rights, including the ability to contact schools and medical providers. In fact, specifically under 169C, when the division has custody, care, and control of the child, parental rights are still intact as far as those sorts of decision making. And this bill does not make any exception for parents during that interim, because very likely, again, they've been removed. There has been a finding of abuse and neglect, but their rights are still intact, which means those parents could also approach schools and medical providers in a way that may not be safe for children who, even while not in their care, are still in that reunification process.
Thank you. May I follow up?
To follow up?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my follow-up question is that, and thank you for bringing up that the point that parental rights are not severed when a child's placement is made outside of their home. Parents still do have an extraordinary amount of rights, but when a child has been removed, they are removed because there is a problem. And so we find that, within this bill, we state right out of the get-go that the general court finds and affirms that parents have a fundamental liberty interest to raise and care for their minor children, and as well as make decisions concerning their care, custody. Fundamental liberty and is all protected. What's missing here is care and attention to their well-being. There's also, I find, a distinct lack in a right of a child not to be abused. And so when a parent has escalated their abuse or neglect, for that matter, and the overriding theme that drives that, and then DCYF has to get involved, and then your office gets involved. If that overriding theme is this parent, in exercising their liberty interests in raising and caring for their minor children, reject their own children because their children are a member of the LGBTQ community, that child's now in danger because of who they are. And the people that are related to them have more rights, if I'm reading this correctly, have continued rights over the decision-making of their lives that could be counterproductive towards the growth of that child. Does this bill set up a dangerous situation for children who are part of the LGBTQ community?
I do believe so, yes. And for the reasons that you pointed out, particularly, and the fact that there are no further safeguards for that in the bill the way it is currently written and amended.
And last question for, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Massio?
When you're involved with the parents and looking for ways for reunification and to move through this very terrible situation that the parents are experiencing and that their children are experiencing, and we know that getting families reunified is one of the goals here in New Hampshire, are there supports that are offered to families that help them understand and then move through understandings to acceptance of who their child actually is?
That is a complex question.
Yes, ma'am.
I was also previously a parent attorney in the DCYF system and a DCYF attorney prosecuting these cases. So as well as my role in OCA, the entire child welfare system, 169C, is set up to reunify families and provide services and supports to both the child and the parents. We have introduced legislation has been introduced to make that primary focus of reunification even stronger. Unfortunately, it was tabled in the House. But yes, the whole system is set up to reunify families. But during that process, again, there usually are some guardrails to ensure that all of those parties can be receiving the services that they need to get there. And it's not just related to LGBTQ children, although they are a very vulnerable population. We see plenty of cases, I've seen plenty of cases where parents just are not necessarily at a place of making those changes, especially early in a case. So there would still be some concerns for a child's safety or well-being if a parent is making decisions at schools and medical, and so those guardrails need to be there to allow a case-by-case, carve out.
And if I may add to that, in my work as a social worker working these very child welfare cases, yes, that is the role of a DCYF worker, is to assess the family, is to identify appropriate services in the community, such as therapy, family therapy work that can be done that supports the identity of the child while also educating the parent on how to best support the emotional growth of their child. And so the whole intention of that reunification work is to allow those appropriate services, and in this instance, particularly a family therapy, to do this work with the family, and that family therapist to report back to the division about the progress that the parents are making to be more understanding, accepting of their child, and whether that therapist feels that the family is in a place where that child can safely reunify and continue to be supported in the manner in which they deserve to for their identity. And so truly that is the reunification work that DCYF oversees. They are not in the home doing that work. They are connecting the family to providers that exist in the community to do that work with the family.
Senator Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So I need some clarification around something that you said, and for page 2, line 7 through 10. You said, and maybe I misunderstood what you said, but it sounded to me like you were saying teachers don't always know when there are cases that are pending or there's a case coming forward, and therefore they should not give parents any information because they don't know what might be out there. So it sounds to me like the position of the Office of Child Advocate is saying teachers should never disclose information because they don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
So no, that is not what I said. And thank you for asking for me to clarify that for you. There is that section below in H where it mentions if the parent is a subject of an investigation of a crime committed against the minor child and law enforcement agency or other officials request information not to be released. And so what I was saying is that in that earlier sentence where we're giving teachers a limited time to return back this information to parents, they are not necessarily going to be aware of an investigation. And so I'm not saying that they should be not providing any information to parents, but I do think there is a very careful line that we need to ensure this bill does not overstep, because if they do share information to a parent who is involved in a criminal investigation and they're not aware, that will impede that investigation and can make it so that that investigation cannot move forward and the parent is not charged for something that law enforcement has very strong evidence of, but because information is let out too soon, it can destroy their entire investigation. And so I'm not saying that they should not be sharing anything at all. I'm a parent myself. I think it's very important for there to be communication between schools and between parents. And I'm very fortunate to have that with my child and in her school personally. But I do think we just need to ensure that nothing in here is going to have that unintended consequence.
Can I follow up? 'Cause I'm
Follow up.
I'm still not clear. Thank you. So I guess I'm still struggling here because there's an unknown, right? The teacher doesn't know something is happening, and your concern is that they will give information that impedes an investigation they don't know about. But I don't see that that the language in here says immediate or 5 days has any bearing on something that they don't know about, because it could be, it could be 10 days before they get that info. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so what is the line for you? How does, in your mind, how does that get solved?
That is a very good question. I do not have a resolution for that. I brought this forward as a concern for this committee to consider and to look at ways to safeguard that from happening. I don't have the solution in looking at this bill. I do worry that it will open the door for that to happen where that is not currently existing in the landscape that we have now, where parental rights are spread through different areas of statute.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I'll direct this to both of you. So on page 2, lines 20 to 23, I can certainly appreciate not wanting to obstruct a law enforcement's active investigation. And I assume here, because it's medical records being requested, we're dealing with something that will be in those records that may relate to the investigation. So in that case, it could be issues of child abuse. It can be issues of, whether it's rape or child molestation. In those situations, it would be in those records information relating to that, and would involve suspected abuse. So I guess my question is, when the request for those records is made, and it's going to be known who made the request, wouldn't that then send off kind of the alarm in someone's head that this is potentially subject to an investigation? Because if that's the case, that in those records, the school would be a mandated reporter. If so, they would have already reported this suspected abuse or whatever has happened. So to then say the school's not aware of the investigation when they're a mandated reporter and it's in their records, I guess I'm trying to figure out. I certainly appreciate it. If you don't know about it, you don't want to obstruct it. But being a mandated reporter, how do you not know about the investigation if it's in the records?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure I can answer it. Reading H, I'm not sure that that is aimed at teachers. Based on the language of that entire section, this appears to be a compilation of rights of parents to anybody, including political subdivisions, governmental entities. So I'm not positive, again, without talking to the drafters, whether H was directed at teachers or more directed at the places that hold those records, that hold medical records, that hold investigatory records. Again, I think someone made a point earlier of this bill generally as written is a little bit confusing because it's compiling a lot of disparate statutes that already exist, but also sort of adding a layer and makes it a little bit more complicated because those different layers do not specifically encapture all of the carve-outs that exist in all those other places. I think there have been many bills that would capture all of the medical carve-outs, that parents actually don't have a right to all of their children's medical records. HIPAA, state and federal laws actually have other carve-outs. Same thing with law enforcement requests. So I'm not sure I can answer that. That might be a question for the drafter, but my read of H is not that that's directed at teachers. Certainly if a teacher had a police report in front of them, well, a police would have already reported, but I don't know that a teacher would have a medical record in front of them. If they saw that, I hope would that they would report it. Yeah.
Follow up?
Follow. And I'll again direct this to both of you. And I understand there was some issue in the last section about consent involving medical procedures or prescription medication. I understand, unless it's otherwise provided by law, but what is, I guess, what's the objection to requiring a parent to consent to a child's medical procedure? I mean, if an adult has to consent to a medical procedure, if not, it's a battery. I'm just wondering, when we talk about a 14 or a 15-year-old, why would we be objectionable to having a parent consent to that and having that standard in law?
So I was not objecting particularly to a medical procedure that would be happening. I did call attention to the final note there about the penalty against medical practitioners, which is a concern to me when you add a penalty to something that adds additional fear of treating that population. But I had not voiced specific concern around consent for procedures, as that is in practice how that goes. I mean, I know there was the discussion around a prescription for birth control that I would not consider a procedure. So I would not consider that difference in consent falling under the question you're asking. Does that answer what you were looking for?
So let's follow up. But wouldn't to avoid this whole scenario where this penalty could come into play is simply for the medical provider to get the parent's consent? Because first of all, without the parent's consent, I'm also not clear who's paying for this medical procedure. We're talking about a 14-year-old, 15-year-old child. I mean, assuming there's a charge for it, the parents aren't involved in this. I'm just trying to figure out seems like it's easy for a medical provider to avoid this altogether by getting the parent's consent.
Well, given there are current protections now, and again, that same conversation for things like birth control, I don't believe we should be walking any of that backwards, because I do think that gets into a dangerous territory of children, particularly if they're seeking out birth control, which protects from unwanted pregnancy and other potential issues. That is critical that we support our children in avoiding pregnancies early on if they can, again, for their overall health. But that already exists separately. So I'm looking at that as a separate issue than where you're talking about procedures to children, because currently procedures to children other than emergent do require parental consent. But an issue like birth control that's currently protected, I do feel that should continue to be protected for our children.
I think the concern, as I stated on the other section, is when compiling all these other rights and laws into one place, it's not clarifying the carve outs and adding things like penalties, which could have a chilling effect on that trusted relationship between a child patient and their doctor. So certainly would not invite walking back any current law about consent. All that, as you said, is already in law. And there are carve outs, though, in law about what requires consent and not, which are not here. And it adds this criminal penalty, which again may have a chilling effect on that trusted relationship. And children disclose quite often to their trusted medical providers as they do with their trusted educators.
Last follow-up, I promise. Thank you, Madam Chair.
One more, very
I
short
think I said one more
Very
last
short.
time, so I apologize. So maybe I interpret it differently, but I read it where it, on both lines 14 and then line 18 on page 5, it says, except as otherwise provided by law or court order. My understanding, any carve-out, I read that as any carve-out, whether it's prescriptions or the procedure itself, it will not be changed by this. So if there is a carve-out somewhere, this won't change it. But if there is no carve-out, this is creating I think a clear policy on what would happen without absent a carve-out. That's just my interpretation. If you,
I think the concern, as has been stated by others here today as well, is that when you alleged to compile all rights into one place, and yet those carve-outs are not specifically listed, the hope of creating more transparency and access to information is actually not the case, because someone reading this saying, oh, all of my rights are here, they're not going to know those other carve-outs, and it doesn't even specify other statutes, federal law. It just says as under the law, which most people, even attorneys, don't know every bit of law that may apply here. So that's just sort of a concern when you're creating an alleged compilation of things and yet it leaves some stuff out, could create more confusion, not clarity.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. Were these issues raised? You must have testified before the House committee. Were these similar issues raised?
I can't recall if we testified at this hearing. I know we may have offered information. We have testified similarly on a number of bills, both this session and the last couple of sessions, with just these same concerns centered around the well-being of children, interference or chilling effect of those trusted relationships, as well as sort of creating some potential unintended consequences when there aren't carve-outs or references to the child welfare.
Okay, would you be willing, I mean, I don't know how much our aides have gotten down here, but would you be willing to put together some your major concerns that you feel should be part of this and just send it over?
Certainly. I know Ryan takes great
Absolutely.
notes, though.
Because
Will
I think
do.
that you've raised some very important concerns, and I think we need to consider them, and I want to have them so I can read them and see them. So,
Absolutely. Happy to do so.
any other?
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler, I have to remind everybody, this is the first bill. And we have taken 2 hours, and we have 4 more bills to go. So whatever you want to say, when I'm going to call the others, please be as brief as you possibly can. And I'd like to finish up this bill where we still have some speakers. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for indulging on getting into this very, very complicated bill. So my question, legal question, please, is that if all of these rights that are pulled from all kinds of other statutes are coalesced into this one place, plus we add on some things, we've already discovered that there are some spaces of so-called parental rights that are missing. For instance, parental rights and responsibilities in Chapter 461A. And so when that provides, in my reading, not having reference to 461A provides a conflict with this bill. And if it does, which statute is the overriding statute? Because this bill, while purported to be only in the context of education in schools, we now know goes further into medical procedures, right? And so it's gone outside of the scope of just the student, faculty, coach, administration relationship with parents and students. And now we've introduced medical. What's missing, if we're really going to pull this all together, is everything in 461. And how will this clash with 461? Because it now adds the family court into this parental Bill of Rights, if you will. And it does not allow for it does not allow for strict scrutiny as 461 does. So you may not be able to answer this in this moment, and I don't get the impression that we're going to make a decision on this bill in this moment, but I would, if you wouldn't mind mulling over the clash between the parental rights and responsibilities in section 461 and how it would impact and clash here, and which one,
So I would
Which
add
one
also
wins?
that 169C is also missing out of here, which is
Yeah.
also very important. I did also practice private family law, 461A. So,
that's why you got the question.
Right? So, 461A and the family court generally focuses very heavily on the best interests of children as being the primary determinant. So that
Yes.
in and of itself may be a conflict. I'm sure Attorney Abbas could also, while I am not a judge, statutory interpretation by the judiciary does rest usually on the plain language of a statute. So if something's not in there, it's not in there. Although they could also come listen to all these tapes and all these discussions of legislative intent. So it is hard to know how things would be interpreted when there are gaps or when there are, as we said, sort of those missing statutory cross references. It is then open to judicial interpretation. Absolutely.
I think if I were to pare it down, to what extent does HB 10 sweep in parental rights and responsibilities into child custody law? So when we're moving away from educational, concerns, and now we're looking into child custody law, and we've got crossover here. How much does this clash? And really, this is certainly not a venue that we need more conflict in, right? So if there is a way to make this less impactful, particularly on the domestic relations chapter, we would appreciate any insight you have.
Unfortunately, the OCA does not have oversight of 461A or family
Understood.
court in that private arena, but it is certainly a compelling question of,
Yeah.
particularly the use of the similar terminology, parental rights and responsibilities in various ways.
Thank you.
Does this finish your questioning? No, do you-
I just have one question. I'm sorry, Senator Ward, you don't often see my hand
You can see
unless I put it over like
Yeah.
this. And thank you very much for taking my question. And it's with respect to section 5, page 5. And I have just so many questions, and hopefully, respectfully, we're going to see some healthcare providers that I can talk to about this parental consent for healthcare services, because what we've heard is that this isn't, even though this is in an education, this is education committee, this is in a primarily school-related bill, this carve-out or this addition, as was stated by one of the sponsors, applies everywhere. Okay, so that's making that statement. The second thing is, and with respect, I'm glad that my colleagues brought up the the number 1 and number 2 that says except as otherwise provided by law. But I'm concerned about the unintended consequences of this. And you, Cassandra, Advocate Sanchez, pointed out the potential for, you don't want to see these walked back. So without any references to exactly what federal, what state, what provisions provide these protections, could we be in a place where children and their children in the schools are confused about what exactly is allowable and what is not allowable?
I do believe there can be confusion with that. And also, as you had pointed out, incorporating this into what otherwise is an education bill and focus on the education realm, are all of our healthcare providers going to know about this change? Are they focus on the statutes that they work within typically, but the placement of this could go unseen by many? And then are they operating in violation of this, not necessarily being aware that an education bill has a component that applies specifically to medical personnel?
I would also point out, sort of in follow-up to Senator Altschiller's comments, 169 is not an education chapter. So even the placement of this bill where it is within the statutory framework is interesting, because 169 is not within the education chapters.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I'll have questions for weeks.
Okay, we are running very, very short here.
I know. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a interesting area. So the rest of you, if you have anything written down, please just give us a summary of your testimony, or make it very, very brief, because I have to get this thing done today. Jackie Bennett? Jacob?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for taking my testimony. I submitted it by email last night. I will avoid repetition. My name is Jacob Bennett. I'm a Chester resident. I'm a girl dad of 3. I want to say thank you to Evan and Oliver for their testimony and their respective reliance on very astute readings of legislation and statistics and telling personal anecdotes about personal experience. I also want to speak to the intent. We spend a lot of time in these meetings and these testimonies talking about the 4 corners of the pages, the words on the pages, what they mean, what they don't mean, where they might also exist, where they don't exist. I want to speak to the intent, the subtext of this bill, because it is a bill that is familiar to people who have testified in years past on similar bills. 2 years ago in 2023, the Commissioner of Education wrote in public pages that educators were essentially a threat to their students because they didn't hold the same family values that the parents did. Now, I will also say that David Trumbull, who's no longer in the room, noted that this bill doesn't say anything about the rights of children. And they do have rights. I will also note that one of the court cases that was brought up in Reed-Berg notes specifically that the rights of parents are not absolute. They are not absolute. So at the very least, this bill should be revised to incorporate and recognize the rights that children have. I also want to speak to that family values sort of notion that the commissioner brought up. I want to speak also to some of the comments that representatives have put out on social media and in public television interviews, including Terry Roy, including Jason Osborne, who's one of the sponsors of this bill, indicating and insinuating that educators are groomers for sexual assault just because they are providing support to students who are coming to them for answers. Maybe because they don't get them at home, maybe because they're afraid to ask at home. That's the subtext. The subtext is that kids need safety, and this bill does nothing to provide that. That's all I have to say. I'll take questions if there are any.
Questions by the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much, and thank you for being so prompt. Do we have Representative Peter Patrigo?
Very much, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. For the record, I am Representative Peter Petrino, and I represent. There we go. Now I have it on. That's the first rule, is press the button. Okay, so I am Representative Peter Petrino. I represent the town of Milford, and I serve on the Children and Family Law Committee, where this bill came from. And I'm here in support of parental rights, but I'm in opposition to House Bill 10. I think we can all agree that parents love their children and cherish their parental rights regardless of any one particular political party. And we have acknowledged that parental rights already exist. So I've asked the sponsors, why then do we need this bill? And the answer I continue to receive is that it would be best to have all parental rights in a single statute. But House Bill 10 just doesn't do that. There are a number of parental rights that aren't in the bill. For example, the right to be notified whenever seclusion and restraint has been used on a child. But if they're looking for a place where all of the rights are coalesced, they have to look no further than the Department of Education's technical advisory, where they list all of those parental rights, including rights that aren't in their bill. So what's their real objective? It's to include within the existing statutes something new. And it's the right of parents, and I quote from the bill, to inquire of the school or school personnel and immediately receive accurate, truthful, and complete disclosure regarding any and all matters related to their minor child. That right there is all they want, and they just have to stick it in a parental bill of rights to make it happen. So I have a problem with this for a number of reasons. First, I believe the provision is unconstitutional. I don't believe that anyone has the right to force somebody else to violate their good conscience. Instead, everyone has the right to their good conscience, including educators. And of course, it conflicts with the Department of Education's One Trusted Adult program, which Governor Sununu championed, and now it's part of the Department of Education. Kids would never be able to trust their teachers, coaches, school nurses, resource officers, and so forth if those trusted adults would be forced to respond to any parental question. But more so, it's dangerous. It puts children in harm's way. For example, let's say that dad is physically abusing mom. He's beating mom up, okay? And the little first grader goes to school and confides in the teacher. Dad somehow gets wind of it and goes to school and asks, is my daughter telling you anything about what's going on at home? The teacher's going to be like, yeah, your daughter told me that you go home and you beat your wife. Okay, totally inappropriate. Any and all questions. So I was a high school teacher for 40 years, and I have some real examples, but we don't have much time for me to go into all of them. But next Tuesday, the House Children and Family Law Committee will be hearing the Senate version, Senate Bill 72. And honestly, I found it to be a bit more tempered than House Bill 10. And my hope is that you will consider to ITL House Bill 10 and allow the Children and Family Law Committee to consider the version that you folks are bringing forth.
30 seconds.
There you go. I'm done.
You're done.
I'm done. That's it right there. Hope you heard all I had to say, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
So we have questions from the committee members. Senator Altshuler.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative. It was a pleasure to serve on Child and Family Law with you in the House. You briefly, because I know we were on a time crunch, briefly mentioned the proposal and the program that's actually pretty fairly new for New Hampshire, One Safe Adult, or One Trusted Adult. Could you talk about that and how it's been implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the whole idea is that there are vulnerable children out there, and they cannot always rely on going to mom and dad to speak to them about concerns for whatever reason. If a child doesn't feel comfortable, again, for whatever reason, this One Trusted Adult program allows for the child to have someone in their life that they can go to, that they value, where they can just vent. In my 40 years of teaching, I really never had students come to me with really those types of personal problems that we tend to hear an awful lot about. But there are times when kids just need someone to listen to, have a sympathetic ear. And if they know that whatever they tell their teacher is going to be brought home to mom and dad, well, kids have no one they can trust. And that's a very dangerous thing.
Thank you.
Any others? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anne Mary Banfield.
Good morning. For the record, Anne Marie Banfield, parental rights advocate in New Hampshire. I do support the bill. I do think it should be amended to include consent for mental health care assessment or services. That is in every Student Succeeds Act and under provision 4002. So if we're going to put everything together, I think that should also be included. I also think that there should be consent for mental health data sharing on a student. So there should be parental consent when anybody within the school or outside the school is sharing mental health data on a child. That should be also considered. I do think it's important to have this all in one place. Senator, I think that your bill, SB 573, a few years ago, the executive director for the New Hampshire Chapter Association of Social Workers, during that hearing, said that that hearing was about parental consent on medical and mental health services. She had said something about that this would have a chilling effect if parents consented when their child was seeking mental health services. But that's already in federal law. So here we had the executive director of a chapter for social workers who didn't even know that the federal law was in existence, which tells me that probably our social workers working in the school are not following the law. So yes, I do think it is important that we put it all together in here. Clearly, they didn't know. Number one, it's ethical too. It's unethical not to include parents when it comes to assessing or servicing their child on mental health services. I do think, that the case was brought up that went to the Supreme Court against Manchester, and this is what's going to support parents. So a lot of times, what we're seeing in the courts is, this you haven't spoken. So if you haven't spoken, if the if the legislative branch hasn't spoken on parental rights, then they're trying to interpret something. So by
more
putting
minute.
this in law, you're directing those judges, if that makes sense. Parent engagement is in ESSA also. So the schools are supposed to be working with parents. I'm not sure if they really are. It's a question I think I'm going to start asking. But that's something that should be already happening. Manchester parent that sued is a trusted adult, but they weren't giving her information when she went to ask. Everybody in the school knew about her daughter. Everybody in the school, the parents of the kids, the teachers, the janitors, anybody could know about that child. And yet the policy itself said, do not tell the parents. So, I look at this EFAs, the school choice. Parents are pulling their kids out over anti-parental rights and almost agenda against them now. And I think that this would actually help parents bridge that gap and keep families in public schools.
Your time is up.
Okay.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. As a parent advocate, wouldn't you agree that when we hand our children over to the schools for a short period of time each day, it is with the understanding that we are entrusting them with our children. We are not handing responsibility. We are still clothing, feeding, caring for our children. We are putting them in that building to learn. And while they're there learning, we trust them with their safety. Isn't this in response to the fact that parents have now been put in a position where they no longer feel like that is the partnership and the understanding when they're bringing a child in, that they've now been put to the outside of education?
Absolutely. I think that was one of, there's problems, I think, within ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. But I do think that parent engagement within that federal law signed by President Obama with bipartisan support really tried to push that home, that you guys are supposed to be doing this with parents. It shouldn't be this. And I think what has happened over time is we're seeing more of this and less of this. And that's exactly the response. I think that, I look at this as a way to bridge that gap. And I know that there's differences of opinions in terms of sometimes political viewpoints, but I think we should all be looking for ways to bridge that gap. And most of this is already in statute, so it's already part of our laws. But again, in federal statute, I don't think we're following the law when it comes to mental health consent on a student. So I do think that this would be helpful. You're putting your guidance counselors and your social workers at risk when they're violating federal law. So having that in here would help them. If the national or the New Hampshire chapter executive person in charge of the social workers in our schools did not know that they should be getting parental consent before they meet with the child on their mental health, that's a serious a glaring problem right now. So yeah, I think where you're coming from is I think that this is what we're trying to do. And I don't have all the answers, but I'm hoping that maybe you guys can come together and find something suitable that doesn't drive families out of schools and reaching for those EFAs if you oppose EFAs. This is what we need to do to work together to find ways to keep parents in school, keep their families in schools. They're paying the taxes. They should be able to trust their schools with their child. said it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deborah House.
Okay, good morning. My name is Deborah Howes. I'm president of the American Federation of Teachers New Hampshire, and I'm here this morning to speak in opposition of HB 10 as it is currently written. I appreciate all the work that's been done since last year to improve the Parental Bill of Rights, and there are still a few areas where we have some severe concerns about this. I'm going to talk about that section on page 2, lines 7 through 10, where we feel the language is overly broad and unworkable, and frankly, is going to lead to it being challenged. The standard that school personnel will need to immediately respond to parent requests and give accurate, truthful, complete disclosure regarding any and all matters relating to their minor child is just, like I said, it's overly broad and unworkable. We've heard that the New Hampshire Supreme Court has already rejected this standard that doesn't apply in all cases. There are some cases where you would not use that standard when you are balancing, for instance, the safety of the child against the parent's request. But also any and all matters related to their minor child. We don't know about any and all matters. If you want to talk about academic performance, again, whether the student is following school rules, how they're doing socially in class, those are things that we would reasonably be expected to know. You need to somehow capture what a previous speaker talked about. What you know, we can give answers on. How do you prove you don't know something, though, if the parent thinks it's happening at school? We do have grave concerns about that the way this is worded, you will have parents who insist you know something, and how can you prove you don't know it and haven't answered? So we have grave concerns with that section. Moving on. We do agree that, parents have the right to direct the education and care of their own child, direct the upbringing and moral and religious training of their own child. What it doesn't state in this bill, which we found was more clearly stated in the Senate version of the Parental Bill of Rights, when you send your child to public schools must teach either the state academic standards or the locally adopted academic standards. So a parent's rights to direct their children's education and moral upbringing must be exercised by either using the opt-out of the health curriculum or through engaging with the local school board to help shape the standards that are adopted. So you don't have an absolute right to micromanage what goes on in the classroom. And the third thing has to do with school board notification of parental rights on page 3, section C. Object to instructional materials. If you get to object to every single piece of material used in the classroom, you are going to squelch good teaching because teachers have to be able to respond to student needs. And if I've run out of time, someone will have to ask me more about that.
Either that or you have to just summarize
I know.
what you wanted to say and just give it to us to read. Any questions? Senator Altfielder will ask you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Howes. So on page 3, section C, can you please expound upon when a parent or two parents or three parents each have conflicting ideas about what materials should be used, and we're working on a particular unit that requires manipulatives for all the students to be able to participate in at this particular unit. But now we have objections from one parent on the manipulatives, another parent on the text, and a third parent on the video that supports the curriculum. Now what?
That would make it very hard. I'd have to go back to the drawing board and have to, do I write 3 individual lessons? Do I, 4, do I scrap it? Do I not teach that standard? That would make it very difficult. I think C really should be that there should be a policy for how you decide on where to get your materials. That would be a clear policy that school boards could adopt, that parents could look at. So they could see what the criteria are But to look at each and every exemplar I'm going to bring in if I have to make up more math word problems because my kids are having trouble learning subtraction with regrouping. If I have to run that by either the school board or parents for review every time I need to do that, that gets cumbersome. Or if I have to bring in extensions because I've got students who are doing really well and they need more challenge. I don't want to wait 2 weeks to be able to give that to them. Or if there's a current event that's particularly relevant and I want to use a newspaper article, if there is a policy that says it's okay to use the local newspaper for a breaking current event, that should be enough for parents to feel comfortable that, I can use, because I live in Manchester, I can use a union leader article that relates to a adopted academic standard in the class I'm teaching. If you're sending your kid to public school and we're following the academic standards adopted by the school board and the curriculum for our class, there's got to be some level of trust. Or perhaps, maybe you should have chosen to send them to a different school. We cannot have parental rights to the point where you're micromanaging everything in the classroom and taking away education from all the other students.
You have a follow-up?
One follow-up.
Okay.
Thank you. So as a speaking from someone who has been in the classroom with the teachers, and curriculum evolves, right?
Yep.
Curriculum evolves, the way we teach things changes, the materials we use changes, and the things that the materials cover also changes, and we evolve that curriculum.
Yep.
I would love to know if we look at back on your page 3, section D, that since this is a new piece of legislation and it can be anything it wants to be, why on on line 33 would it be necessary to have a parent withdraw his or her minor child about any instruction that would teach them about what acquired immune deficiency syndrome education is and how that affects public health? And in previous conversations about bills like this, we have heard that, well, since it's a sexually transmitted disease, children need to be taken out of that and their parents cover that topic, or it could be very triggering. And, I recall in my biology class, we talked about emphysema exactly at the time that a family member of mine was dying from emphysema. And my parents didn't pull me out of that class. It was difficult to hear, but it was actually part of the curriculum and created quite a lot of information for me at a really, really difficult time. What could possibly be a motivation for wanting to take out acquired immune deficiency syndrome education out of a sex education program?
That would certainly seem to be a place that you might want to look at amending this bill, because that seems to be a part of health curriculum that is not necessarily only related to sex education. It is a disease that can be transmitted through blood transfusions. Being a blood donor for years, and always being asked about that, so they can make sure that you're not passing on any chance of transmitting the disease.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. I do have a question for you, but I have some clarification of what the
Yep.
senator just asked. So my husband is a cancer survivor. He survived a form of leukemia. And when my children were very small, because he had it when they were babies, we explained it to him that Daddy had sick blood. So they start HIV education in schools when kids are in kindergarten, and often use some of those similar terms. So I formally requested that my kids did not get that education without letting me know ahead of time, so that I could have the conversation first and explain to them that Daddy's sickness was not contagious. You couldn't catch that, and these were two very different things. So that, as a parent, was my right to explain that to my child. I also think how we present that information is very important, because sometimes teachers do not understand the sensitivity of these subjects, and they teach things to children that are not age appropriate.
So that would be in your health standards. And that
just-
would
I'm
be the
saying
place
this
to, it's an academic standard, something that is either adopted by, you know, the State Board of Education, if you're following that, or your local school board.
But again-
That's the place to engage with it.
The question was, why would a parent need to have that information ahead of time and opt out? Now, that's the answer to that question. But the question for you is, with these conversations, with these bills every time, it is put out there, which is so dangerous for children, that parents are not safe. Parents are not safe. This is what I've heard in this room over and over again. Parents are not the safe people. And the message that kids receive on that is detrimental to their mental health and well-being. But we also hear that schools are the utopia. And I'm not saying there aren't great schools or great teachers, because of course there are. But there are also bad people in every profession. And we heard from someone that came to testify today that they were so horribly bullied in their school that they had to leave that school. There was no safe person for them in that building. People weren't protecting them. But yet, you know, and also when you go and look up quickly, how many children have been the victims of sexual assault by teachers who they may have thought was their safe person, who they may have thought that they could go to them and have a conversation with them. That
Is
was an
there a
intimate
question, or are you
conversation. Yes, it's
making a
coming.
speech?
Yes, it is. No, it's coming.
Because you're,
Do you know, as you know, the leader of the teachers union, do you know how many teachers have actually been accused or convicted of sexual assaults in the state of New Hampshire?
now that I've listened to your speech, and you've summarized other people's testimony to ask me a question.
Yes, that's what I did.
Yes, wow.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, is that not within my purview to summarize why I was asking you the question based on the information that was brought forward? So that's the question I'm asking you.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Point of order, Madam Chair. Is it not appropriate for the senators who are on this committee to direct their questions to the testimony being directly put in front of them, and not ask for people who have come to testify and bring their time and expertise to comment on people who spoke before them?
I was speaking to testimony that was brought before us about the schools. This is a representative of the teachers union, and I presented the question of,
And
do
the
you know
person
number
you
of
directly,
teachers- do you know the number of teachers?
the
who've
person
been
you
accused?
directly referred to,
Madam
who
Chair,
talked
may
about
we
being
have
bullied, was here
clarification?
opposing this bill.
We'll have
And I'm done.
30-second recess.
It was a valid question. It was a valid question. Microphone's off.
You want to vouch for all parents?
Excuse me?
You want to vouch for all parents? Yeah.
We are, no, can't just do this. It's 20 minutes of 12. I think I'm gonna no more testify for bill, for the House Bill 10. This was coming in very late. Is Brian Hawkins here? And after Brian Hawkins, it'll be Courtney Reed. No, Connery, is it Connery? No, Courtney Reed after that. Okay, so he's probably left.
I sent Brian a message, so maybe we'll
No,
get to switch
Brian Hawkins I
spots.
was looking for. But you're Courtney Reed, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep my remarks brief. For the record, my name is Courtney Reed. I serve as policy advocate with the ACLU of New Hampshire, and I want to voice opposition to House Bill 10. Primarily, our concerns lie in the vague language in the bill on page 2, line 7, 1A. The word complete and immediate, echoing some of the concerns that you've heard from the Office of the Child Advocate with how this bill would negatively impact and pose harm to LGBTQ students, as well as put educators in a very difficult position. Just to begin, undoubtedly parents have an undeniable right to be involved and direct their child's education. But again, as you've heard from other speakers, this bill risks the disclosure of private information about students regardless of their consent or the potential harm that this disclosure could cause. And it strips educators of the ability to thoughtfully consider how that disclosure might impact a student's right to learn and thrive, especially given the immediacy provision in the bill. And so the bill falls short to account for situations where withholding information might actually protect a child from abuse or neglect. We've heard in the reference to New Hampshire's Child Protection Act, and in this bill, as we're reading it, there's no exemption provision to consider the safety and well-being of a child. And it was echoed earlier that strict scrutiny standard of review doesn't balance the interests of the safety and well-being of the child, with the privacy and identity of the child at school, with the rights of the parents in a way that the courts have already called for and have recognized. So, of course, we understand that students learn best when they feel safe and when they can be themselves and trust their educators. And so we believe that a welcoming school environment that fosters positive, trusting relationships to prepare students to communicate with
minute.
educators on their own terms when they feel ready is the best environment for everyone. And so just want to close noting that schools are legally and ethically bound to uphold non-discrimination laws and students' confidentiality rights, and that these are places, regardless of gender identity, where students should feel safe, supported, and valued. And I'll just close there to keep time
Thank you
for
very
you all.
much. Any questions?
Thank you
Seeing
so
none,
much.
Thank you very much. Now, Brian Hawkins, I saw you come in.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the
Do you
record,
know the rules?
I have not been here for the hearing, so
Okay. We have had quite a few people saying things, so if they have said things that you approve of, you can just say, I agree with it. And then if you have a written thing, summarize it, because we're running very short on time.
certainly I will try and I
Okay.
apologize. I was in
3 minutes
House
is the
Finance.
maximum.
Sure. For the record, Brian Hawkins here opposing House Bill 10. With the short amount of time, I'll just focus on a couple pieces, specifically on page 2, the addition that the House made on lines 7 through 10 with respect to an inquiry of school or school personnel. I think this has some of the same questions and challenges we saw with Senate Bill 96, where they're asked for essentially, where they talked about completely and honestly. I think there's the same problem lies here that we heard from the Department of Education, the subjective standard here in letter A. It also references school and school personnel. So like, where does administration come into this? If there's a question that needs to be reviewed for some reason, this seems to circumvent the process of that. by asking for an immediate answer or a very short time frame. And I think I would just say the other thing is, what if someone forgets something? Does this mean that they violated the law? I don't see any qualification in there to accommodate for that. And then I think I'll just, since I'm sure you've heard a little bit of this in your hearing up until now, I just think when you're talking about these sorts of things in a state law versus an employment situation or a school board policy, you really ought to be narrowing that to information that is really pertaining to the specific issues that you're trying to get at, because I think educators throughout New Hampshire are communicating very well with their parents, with their students' parents overall. And if there's an issue that comes up with a particular person, I think that's something that is best left to, that parent engaging with the administration. And so I'll close there and send in the rest of my comments, which I'm sure you have heard today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The section that you referred to on page 2, 7th line to 10, it has been talked about quite a few times today.
Okay.
So it's part of what we have to consider when we do consider it. Questions from committee members?
Negative.
Seeing none, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, let's see what's next. Nancy Biederman.
Hi, Nancy Biederman, former teacher, 15 years, parent of 2 children who have now become adults, and both of them with chronic illnesses. I am part of the Rare Disease Advisory Council for New Hampshire, and I'm speaking for myself, not the council. I am very happy that there's parent rights in here for medical concerns, as my children both have chronic illnesses, and one of them has a rare disease, has multiple rare diseases right now. She keeps collecting them. I don't know why. And if you've ever talked to a parent with a child with a rare disease, know that there are multiple of them that have been accused of child abuse before their rare disease has been discovered, and that medical personnel are usually the first ones to report them. It is a very big concern in the rare disease community as a parent. Until I found out what my child's rare disease was, I was very scared of taking her to the doctor and wondering if I was going to be accused. There is also the possibility that I was very concerned about my child's health and that I would be accused of Munchausen by proxy. Because this doctor saw my child for 15, 20 minutes. I'm living with that child day in and day out and seeing everything that she's going through. As far as information and sharing it, my daughter's information has now been shared and breached multiple times. We just now got another notification from another doctor's office that her information has been hacked. At school, PowerSchool data, specifically her medical information, has been hacked. She has been out of school almost 4 years. That information was supposed to be deleted according to their policy. It was not. We're trying to get hold of exactly what they have. One IT person says, oh, don't worry, it's just because she has an EpiPen, or if a child has an EpiPen. Every employer is checking data. Every employer is checking to see what you have. And if you have a medical condition, you will not get hired. They don't want their insurance rates to go up. As far as teachers and wanting to know, I just looked up the revoked list, and it's at 29 pages of credentials, of educator credentials being revoked for various reasons. There's 29 pages in New Hampshire. Parents' rights don't stop at the school door. School isn't a safe place for every child, and you need to know that there are teachers that are not to be trusted. There are that have their own agendas. And as far as school policies, I have been looking up school policies. One district will have 100. Another district will have 2. It just varies. There's no consistency from school to school, and parents don't realize that. And as far as checking about curriculum, I did challenge curriculum that was in my child's school. It was a book that the school district bought. $30,000 they wasted on this book to push it on kids. It was very politically biased. And it was not acceptable. So I had to come up with, according to school board policy, other curriculum for my child to do to meet the standards for that objective.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you for taking my question. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for your testimony and ask, is your daughter doing okay now?
No, she's not, because she keeps collecting rare diseases.
I'm sorry.
So every day we think we have one thing figured out, it's not, and we find something else. As far as doctors don't know these rare diseases. There's over 7,000 rare diseases, and that number is growing. Another number I found, there was 10,000 being identified, because within a rare disease, they have a spectrum. And so you'll have type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Even my mother's rare disease is now up to a type 4. And there was only type 1 and 2 when she was first diagnosed.
So can I
It's
assume
very
that-
scary.
That this bill would have helped you, or for other parents like you, because that communication between the teachers and the parents is so critical with kids that have.
Yes, because I have to trust them that if they see something is going on with my child, that they do tell me what's going on and what they're seeing in the classroom, because they are seeing my child during the day. And my child, again, being a child, she has kept a lot of things from me because she doesn't want to worry me. And it's not that she doesn't want to tell me, she's trying to protect me and make sure that I don't have more worries. And so when I ask a teacher, how is my child doing? Even when my first child was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I went up to the teacher and said, are they using the bath? Is she using the bathroom more often? Is she drinking more water? I mean, why would a teacher not tell a parent that? And as a teacher, I had tons of parents. I had a parent ask me once, hey, is my child doing drugs? And I'm like, I'm not seeing any signs in the classroom, but if you are asking that question, that's your job as a parent to go to the doctor and go have your child tested. And my students always knew where the line was with me as far as telling me stuff, because I always told them when I taught middle school in every grade, if you tell me something that's going to endanger yourself or someone else, I do need to tell other people. And I don't keep secrets from parents, and I never did. Any parent asked me a question, I responded. I don't know what the big deal is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Kate Cook.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Kate Cook, and I am here as the parent to a non-binary child who is now a young adult. And I wanted to relay my story of my child so that maybe people better understand what it's like to have a child in school who maybe is a little bit different and you don't know about it at home. So my child at school was using they, them pronouns and identifying as non-binary, using a different name at school, and I didn't know about it. And when I found out, I was a little hurt. But I was hurt because I was concerned that I wasn't providing a safe enough environment for my child to feel comfortable telling me at home that they were using a different name and different pronouns at school. The reason I was concerned about that is that we provide a very safe, comfortable, happy home for my child. We have a religious home. We homeschooled for elementary school and middle school, sent my child to private school. And by the way, this was in a private school, not a public school. And we thought we were providing a very caring home, but my kid wasn't comfortable. And the reason my child wasn't comfortable is not because they were worried about us knowing that they were LGBTQ, that they were trans. The concern was that they weren't using their given name. And that given name is the name that is my grandmother's name, a very beloved grandmother. And they were worried about offending us because they weren't using my grandmother's name anymore. Now, children make decisions like that for various reasons because they all have their own identities. They're individuals. They have their own thoughts, their own feelings. They don't disclose everything to us. Teenagers especially don't disclose everything to us. And we can't possibly know everything they're thinking. As a parent of a teenager, sometimes you have to be a little bit uncomfortable because you just don't know everything about them, and we're not going to know everything about them. But I think what's critical to understand is that my concern was whether or not I was providing a safe space for my child. Other parents want to know whether or not their kid is LGBTQ or trans because they want to intervene and change that reality for that child.
One more
Those
minute.
children are not safe in their homes. And what this bill does is it's an outing bill. It's designed to out LGBTQ kids, kids that would not be safe in their home if they were outed to their parents. So I think that that's what is critical here to remember. My child, my young adult, has chosen to leave the state of New Hampshire, to leave the US for college. Why? Because of bills like this and the other bills that are working their way through the New Hampshire State House this year that make them feel unsafe to be LGBTQ in the state of New Hampshire. And that's essentially the message you send when you pass bills like this. You tell youth who are bright and capable that they are not safe in this state and that you will not respect them and respect their identities.
Your
Thank
time
you.
is up. Any questions from committee members? Wait a minute, maybe some questions for
I do
you.
have a question.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We have a few more people who are going to testify on HB 10. But I'm going to make an announcement right now that the House Bills 319, 653, 763, and 753 are recessed for a future date to be determined. So having said that, I'm sorry for the ones of you who wanted to look forward to the other bills, but we haven't even finished the first bill of the day. So I appreciate you coming, and we'll let you know when they're going to be heard. Continue with testimony for HB 10, Courtney Tanner.
I will say good morning because we have 6 more minutes.
Yes.
So good morning. This is Courtney Tanner. I'm the Senior Director of Government Relations at Dartmouth Health. And here today to testify on some of the provisions in this bill because I have a tracker at my desk and I'm looking at all of the bills that are contemplating medical records and access to medical records and parental consent. We have these conversations periodically in the state legislature. Last year, we worked on Senate Bill 576. And I just want to make sure that, number one, Dartmouth Health has a seat at the table as we contemplate this because it's very important to us that parents, one, not only are consenting, that's the law, but two, are involving parents in their children's treatment and they're building their treatment plans because it's imperative that parents are involved when for the vast majority of parents. There are always going to be exceptions to the rule, either for parents, not going to touch the teacher side, but there are always going to be exceptions to the rule. And so we also need to make sure that those exceptions are contemplated, specifically around child welfare provisions and other types of medical services. So I also just want to flag one other piece before I get into the bill. There is a bill that's coming to you. It's House Bill 560, and this is a bill that passed out of Child and Family Law and is crossing over to you. This is relative to parental access to medical records. And I hope that, I know this committee probably won't work on it, Health and Human Services will, but that's a bill that we want to be intimately involved on too, because it actually has some interplay with several of these provisions. So I have lots of questions on page 2, lines 18 down to 25, 26, 27. Questions about kind of how this might happen. There's a requirement in this bill that would require a parent to be present. Again, I want to underscore that we are always championing parental involvement when appropriate, but what happens when there's a restraining order or there's a child that's involved in a child welfare circumstance? I understand that's not the general circumstance, but it is the reality for some families and some children. And so what happens in those circumstances? When we look to the back of the bill, there's several provisions around access to medical records and access to healthcare records. There are requirements in law, federal rule that require certain healthcare records for adolescents to be redacted, and some of those some of healthcare information is protected, particularly things like substance use disorder treatment or sexually transmitted disease treatment. That's protected for that adolescent as they're moving along in their life and learning how to access healthcare themselves in consultation with their parents. So we have several concerns about this bill. I appreciate you've heard a lot of testimony about many of those concerns. I'm happy to take questions, but I think this bill needs some work before it's ready for prime time.
Do you have any suggestions for how it should be reworked?
I would love to work on House Bill 560 with you all. I think I would have, it would take a heavy red pen to work on the medical provisions in this bill. I know that this committee did work on Senate Bill 72, which contemplates some of the concepts that are contemplated in this bill. So I don't know how you are all going to reconcile the two.
I haven't seen HB 560 yet. So.
Not yet.
Okay.
It's early.
Yeah, not yet, so. Any questions? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
So in following along with your testimony, one of your prime concerns is on page 2, I believe lines 18 through 27. And it looks like on line 20, part H, there is a caveat which would take a child's parent who is the investigation of a crime or some other, or had their rights terminated by court order, and I think I share your question of how does that play out, particularly in an emergency situation? Is that what you were talking about, in an emergency situation when?
Well, even before an emergency situation. So
Okay.
this really doesn't contemplate when a family may be involved in a child welfare circumstance and there's a parenting plan. Those cases are confidential.
Yes.
And this provision doesn't contemplate that. So particularly, I mean, think about when there's a domestic violence circumstance and the surviving parent has a parenting plan, that those types of circumstances are contemplated and shared with a medical provider and a healthcare institution. I don't know how. I would be concerned about the vulnerability of that child in that family.
May I follow up?
Follow up.
Okay, so along those lines, if we go back up to, we'll stay in that section on line 24, part I, to consent in writing before a biometric scan is made. That would be implying, as this bill does, that both parents that Dartmouth Health would have to secure the written permission of both parents before being able to move forward.
That's a question I would have. I can't answer it as written.
So is the question also with part J? Because that was the second half of my question there.
Yeah.
Okay. And finally, if I may, Madam Chair, in part G, to be physically present at any healthcare facility providing care license pursuant to.
That's our licensing statute. Yep.
Right. So, but to be physically present also doesn't take into account restraining orders and parenting plans. So who?
That's a question we were, how do we implement
that's
that?
part of your who question is who implements that?
Yeah. And I think again, I have this chart on my desk because there are several of these bills that are kind of floating out there and that this legislative body is debating. And so there just needs to be a reconciliation so that we're operating under one standard and that we're contemplating the exceptions to the general rule.
Thank you.
Prentice is ahead of you, Senator Abbas.
Prentice is ahead.
Senator Prentice.
I don't know when P goes before A, except this one time.
You had your hand up first.
I know, I'm Senator Ward. I'm trying to make light after a long morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Courtney, thanks for coming before us today. So, I've been really pleased to have somebody who works in the healthcare system before us to answer some of my questions, some of which I think we might end up getting to later. So let's, on page 2, you shared an area you have concern with that you're tracking with other type bills, but I want to start on 20 and just go down to 23. And so this has to do with what notes are protected by HIPAA. And I may have started to back myself off earlier during another conversation with somebody who was testifying, but thinking about this more and looking at this more, I know psychotherapy notes are directly protected by HIPAA. Okay, unless there's a court order that asks for them to come out, is asking for them to be released. But I don't believe that that's what this says. I think this says access and review of all medical records. So I want to put psychotherapy in there as the personal representative of the children. I think the second, so after we get past line 20, all of this, if I'm reading it correctly, relates to who and how they can ask and why, but doesn't get at the issue of what exactly is protected and how deeply it's protected. Are you following me there?
Yeah, yes, HIPAA is one federal regulation that does provide confidentiality standards, but that's just one regulation. There also is 42 CFR Part 2, which protects access to substance use disorder services. So that's an even higher standard than HIPAA. And so as we think about House Bill 10, what will be coming to the Senate, House Bill 560, we just want to make sure that we're contemplating both state and federal requirements, and that there's not conflicting standards in legislation that's passed. I think if we want to make sure that we are specifically protecting therapy notes, then we're going to want to make sure that that's specifically carved out or enumerated in a forthcoming amendment.
Great. Follow-up on the last page, and I'll do my best to make this quick. Thank you. So going back to page 5, this section starting at 13 that is about healthcare, and I have so many questions, but I'll just go right back to baseline here. And you may or may not have heard me talk earlier, because there are exceptions that are provided in law. Some of these laws are state laws, some of these laws are federal laws, some of the laws are places where they are silent. My concern is that there may be unintended consequences of trying to take what's in multiple other places and pull it in here. So will we see a change potentially due to a misunderstanding in access that is already available to, say, a teenager for birth control because of a misunderstanding, say counseling, prescribing, state law, federal law? What about teen pregnancy, like managing being a teenager who is pregnant and is managing her pregnancy? How could this impact them?
Yeah, that is a question that I have. Would that person, say just hypothetical 17-year-old, assume the rights as a parent, or would they still be under the parental umbrella of their parent, and so the future grandparent? So what does that look like for that circumstance? Representative Senator Abbas may disagree too, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the word law because we have statute, we have rules, we have administrative rules that contemplate different requirements. And so provided by law or court order, it's much broader than just law. I mean, we need to be thinking about what are our federal regulations also. And so I have some concerns about just the simplicity of that verbiage. And frankly, I think that Senate Bill 72 and hopefully House Bill 560 can do a better job kind of getting us to the other side where we're codifying protections for these populations. So I want to work on these
Yeah.
bills, but I just don't think this House Bill 10 gets us to where we need to be.
Senator
Happy to work on
Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So if I understood your answer to the last question, so provided by law or court order, you're suggesting there should be clarification on whether that would apply to regulations as well?
Yes, I mean, I think there definitely needs to be clarification. I think there's a lot more opportunity for improvement than just that, but I think that that could be one addition. But there's more.
I understand that, but that's one small. That's an easy clarification as opposed to some other. If I ask a follow-up, and I know you're here on behalf of a hospital or
Yes, I
medical-
represent Dartmouth Health. Yep.
If I could ask, and this you have to answer this today, but if you could maybe provide it to the committee, is there what policy do they have? And it doesn't have to be a copy of the exact policy, can be summarized, but when for medical procedures that are performed where they don't require or get parental consent when the procedure involves a minor.
Sure. I am happy to talk about this because we've talked about this ad nauseum with our department chair of pediatrics. What happens to that group that's post 12 years old who can be in an exam room without a parent? We always champion parental involvement in treatment plans, always, to the extent that it's possible. There might be a circumstance where there is a child welfare involved family, but that's not the general rule, right? The general rule is that we're championing our parental involvement. Parental consent, pediatric assent to such care is extremely important to us, and it's going to depend on what that treatment plan is. So if it's mental health, if it's substance use disorder, those standards are a little bit different. If it's a rare disease, I have a 5-year-old who has an esophageal disorder. Trust me, I'm going to be in her treatment room for a long time because it's complicated. So it's going to depend on the disease state and that kid. But we are always championing parental involvement.
One last follow-up. Well, the point that I'm getting at
Sure.
is there was some prior members of the public who testified. They thought it would be confusing without having the carve-outs expressly stated herein, as opposed to the broader term that you reference. And I'm just going to assume.
Point of
someone-
order, Madam Chair. Again,
Someone.
we're only supposed
is
to
your
be,
point of order?
my point of order is, are we not supposed to be directing our questions to the person who has come to testify to the materials that they testified to and not asking them to speculate about what other people may or may not have said prior to their arrival?
It is a fair point. I'm not sure when you arrived. So if you weren't there for my reference, that you probably might have went up and.
What I can say is that for Dartmouth Health, we are always championing parental involvement.
But if I can clarify the question, if that's all right, Madam Chair.
Okay, what is your question?
What I'm getting at is if there is a comprehensive list, whether it's including carve-outs by age, if you could provide that to the committee, and so we can consider whether we want to add that to this as a potential amendment or not.
Sure. And I don't know if House Bill 560 is going to child and family law, but that might be another opportunity for us to do some work together.
We'll see which committee is getting it, but I'll have written down, so I'll be keeping an eye on it.
Thanks, Senator.
Are you finished?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Courtney. Just one last question. This ties into what Senator Abbas was just asking you, and what I talked about or pointed to earlier. Is it your opinion that if this provision were to stay in here, would it limit confusion if it pointed to the specific federal laws, state laws, state administrative rules, federal administrative rules, and not leave it up to, I don't like guesswork, but I think with specificity, avoid any potential confusion?
I have great concern about page 5, lines 13 through 27, 13 through 26, because I think not only does it provide this broad language is too broad, and we haven't even talked about Section 5 that creates a misdemeanor for a healthcare provider that violates such provision. So I would hope that this entire provision would be struck from the bill. Frankly, it's not appropriate to be in an education bill.
All set?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Arthur Stratton. Is it Arthur? No, probably not. What is it?
It's Kathy.
Kathy?
Kathy Stratton.
Your C goes all the way around.
It doesn't.
I can vouch for Senator.
My apologies for the confusion.
Anyhow, welcome.
Thank you very much. In the interest of brevity, I'm going to summarize my testimony, but I do have it written here. My name is Kathy Stratton. I am the New Hampshire Medical Society CEO, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Medical Society in opposition to HB 10. I'd like to begin by recognizing the value and importance that our physicians play on the physicians hold on the role that parents play in the education and medical care of minors. Parents who are physically and emotionally present provide valuable support and guidance not only to their children but to the institutions that provide education and medical care. For the purposes of my testimony today, I want to tease out elements of the bill that impact physical and mental health care. The New Hampshire Medical Society has several concerns with this bill. First, that it directly interferes with the physician-patient relationship. Second, that it creates confusion about the physician's discretion to protect patients. And third, Section 5 establishes a Class A misdemeanor penalties to physicians treating patients. We have concerns about the way the bill commingles educational and healthcare provisions. There are very different settings with different considerations, expectations, and laws. Of particular concern are Section 1, A, F, G, H, O, and G, and the final section that establishes penalties for physicians who are treating minors. These sections do not clearly reconcile exceptions to the general rule, particularly in child custody cases, as DHHS and Courtney Tenner pointed out in their testimony earlier. I want to focus on Section 1 as well, that requires written parental consent for healthcare practitioners to provide or solicit or arrange for health services or prescribe medicinal drugs. This directly interferes with the physician-patient relationship. Provisions of this bill will have chilling effects on the physician relationship with their patients. Consider a few issues where a minor might seek medical care that doesn't necessarily fall under the emergency exemption of the bill, but may have urgency, for which written parental consent could be a barrier resulting in delayed or avoided care. Minors who are seeking treatment for substance use disorders, minors with health issues who may be pondering self-harm, minors who are sexually active and are at risk of sexually transmitted diseases in pregnancy. We respectfully urge you to consider the unresolved issues in this bill and unintended consequences of it and oppose this bill. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none. You'll get Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. In what you were just talking about, you highlighted, I think it's on page 5, Section 1. That's the section. Am I at the right place?
I hope so.
The very last bit of your testimony, the part that says healthcare services are prescribed medicinal drugs to a minor child. Okay.
Right.
So along that, there were 3 examples that you gave, and I'm afraid I just wanted to make sure I missed one. Minors experiencing mental health crises could be affected by this. Minors who are experiencing pregnancy-related reproductive issues would be affected by this. And
Substance
my pen
use.
wasn't fast enough.
Substance use treatment.
Thank you. So in your under those 3 things, under your reading of this, disclosures to parents, would have to happen, where without this bill right now in the world today, students who are experiencing mental health crises, experiencing reproductive health issues, or are experiencing substance misuse can get help without necessarily looping in their parents on the front end, and then have the opportunity to have that conversation themselves afterwards without having to have the medical provider tell them.
Disclose, correct.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Kathy,
Yes.
thank you for taking my question. One of the two key sponsors came before us this morning, and I clarified with that person as it relates right now that this section here is not just for education, but is for all of healthcare. Considering that you represent medical practitioners, do you think that there are unintended consequences of a section that is broadly constructed like this for your providers and ultimately their patients? And I know that is a broad question in itself, but if it's going to apply to every corner of healthcare, what are the unintended consequences that you've come here to talk about today?
I mean, we can go through like the reproductive health care consequences, delayed care, for sexually transmitted diseases. If students or youth believe that they can't receive confidential care, sometimes they will either delay or avoid care. Chlamydia, for example, if left untreated, results in sterilization. That's a lifelong consequence. So there are some big, major concerns with anybody who delays care, in particular this vulnerable population of youth who may not believe that they would have the support in their either home or guardian's capacity to receive that care.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Liz Canada still here? Is it Liz? Yeah, okay. Okay. You said 2 minutes, is that what you said?
That's what I said. 2 minutes. Hold me to it.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name's Liz Canada, for the record. I'm the Advocacy Director at Planned Parenthood of Northern New England and Planned Parenthood New Hampshire Action Fund. I'm going to focus just on the end of House Bill 10, because I've heard some conversations. I was out in the hallway, but I heard some conversations about what is protected and what is not in law. And I think we need some clarification. I think that might be helpful. So, birth control. Right now, teenagers can access confidential birth control in New Hampshire. But it is not protected. There's nothing in state law saying that they are allowed to consent to it. That does not exist. What is out there is Title X protections. So providers who are part of the Title X program, they are required to offer confidential birth control. So right now, teenagers can receive confidential birth control across the state. If this bill were to pass, that would no longer be the case unless a teenager was going specifically to a provider who receives Title X funding. It would not be allowed anywhere else. There is nothing in state law requiring or allowing teenagers to consent for birth control. So that's number one. Number two, for a teenager who is pregnant and decides to continue her pregnancy, there is nothing in law allowing her to consent to her own health care in that pregnancy. So if she wants to receive an epidural, she needs parents' consent to do so, even though she has made the decision to continue her pregnancy and to become a parent. Number three, and again, I'm focusing only on sexual and reproductive health care, but number three, there is nothing in state law allowing a teen to consent to receiving care for yeast infections. So a teenager who wears a wet bathing suit and then gets a yeast infection can see her doctor and talk about this privately and get a prescription sent in. And that's something that can happen now. So those 3 points are really important to understand the ramifications that would happen if this were to pass, if House Bill 10 were going into effect. The other part, to go back to birth control for a moment, the FDA approval of emergency contraception means that teenagers can go to a pharmacy and buy emergency contraception. They can just do that on their own. If House Bill 10 passes, they would still be able to do that. That is still part of, the FDA approval, but it would not allow them really to talk to providers and receive contraception through a healthcare provider. And I think what the state of New Hampshire and what, I think what we can all agree with is that we want teenagers talking to healthcare providers. Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, and, we've heard from other providers today, parental involvement is top of mind and is part of every single conversation with teenagers. That is always the case. And as we just heard, there are times when teenagers aren't ready to talk to their parents yet. And confidential birth control and all these other services that I've talked about are really important for them to be able to access, and House Bill 10 would change that. And I want to pose just one more question for you, because I don't know this answer, and it is what is sort of needling in my head. Our New Hampshire law on abortion for teenagers is parental notification. So I'm not sure if House Bill 10 would now require parental consent for abortion. And that would be a further restriction on abortion in New Hampshire. So it is not clear to me. I sort of pose that question to you because I am not sure. But just wanted to sort of set the record straight about what is covered or not covered for different providers. So I bet I went over 2 minutes, and I'm sorry, but I did my best.
You did.
Okay,
But that's all
yeah,
right.
sorry.
Any questions from any other committee members? Let's start with Senator Abbas this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question.
Of course.
I know I heard Title 10, and I know you listed some other laws. If there's any laws or regulations that you didn't reference expressly in your testimony, but kind of alluded to, could you email those to the committee?
Absolutely. And I will pass out our testimony as well. I was not planning to testify today, so it was sort of ad-libbing, but I will send more materials. Absolutely. Happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for answering my question. At the top of your testimony, I believe you said right now, and I'm trying to quote you, but if I'm off, let me know. Right now, teenagers can access birth control, but there is no affirmative right to it. Is that correct?
There's nothing thank you for the question. There is nothing in state law or federal law that says a teen can consent to her own contraception. But there's also no ban on that, right? So there's no restriction. This would be a restriction and would force there to be consent. Title 10 providers, the Title 10 program, which I don't have time to go into, but is in this testimony in detail. Title 10 requires confidential services for all patients, and that includes for teenagers. And so for Title 10 providers, if a teenager were to go there, they are allowed to consent to their own contraception confidentially. So that's something that happens for the Title 10 program. But there is not a law overarching for everybody in the state. And if I may just add one more piece to this, because I think this is also important. In Texas, and I believe we testified in Senate Judiciary last year about this, in Texas, there are no teens who have access to confidential birth control right now. They have passed a law like this. They have enforced it in this way. And for the first time in decades, their teen pregnancy rate has gone up. So there are consequences to passing laws like this that I know New Hampshire and lawmakers do not want to happen. And so just want to raise that issue, which is in the testimony as well, that y'all pass out. Thank you.
Yeah, follow up.
Follow up.
So right now, teenagers can access birth control. They have no affirmative right to gain access to birth control. They just have access right now, as the way our laws stand.
Yes, because there's not a restriction on it. They are able to access confidential birth control with their providers. Yes.
Well, you said with their providers, but actually anyone can access birth control through the mail or buy condoms at CVS, which is also a form of birth control. So if this bill were to pass, do we have to cease selling birth control over the counter? Because there is over the counter hormonal birth control now? Or would we have to cease selling that and card people the way we do cigarettes? Would we not be able to sell condoms? And would that, without some sort of a screening mechanism?
Thank you for the question. I think what House Bill 10 leaves us with is a lot of questions of not being clear of what's going to happen for these really important reproductive healthcare services. Thank you.
Any other further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I'll hand this over. Thank you.
And this actually concludes the hearing on House Bill 10. Thank you for coming, for your patience. It's been a long time. And we'll let you know about the other bills.